Before we begin, pause for a moment. Where are you listening from right now? Are you lying in bed, maybe under a heavy blanket, trying to relax? Or perhaps you're strolling through your house, headphones on, letting your mind drift. Take a deep breath. Close your eyes if you like. Now open your mind to a history most people never talk about. Tonight, we're not just going to tell you boring facts. You're about to hear the forgotten reasons why. For thousands of years, humans all over the world slept completely naked. And no, it's not the reason you think. But before we begin, this strange and surprising journey into ancient bedrooms, dim candlelit chambers, and cold stone floors, do me a favor, tap the subscribe button. This channel is all about relaxing history, weird history, the kind of history you hear right before sleep when your mind is soft and open. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next strange story. Are you ready? Let's start. Imagine it's midnight in a medieval town. Outside your window, you hear the crackle of torches as the town guard makes his rounds. The air smells of wood smoke, cold iron, and damp straw. Inside your house, it's even colder than outside because stone walls don't keep heat well. Yet, you're lying in bed without a stitch of clothing. No shirt, no trousers, just your skin against rough linen sheets, or sometimes no sheets at all, just straw. Why? Why would someone in history choose to sleep naked in the cold? The answer isn't just about comfort. It's about rituals, superstition, social rules, and the human body's strange relationship with the night. Let's start with the Romans. Roman citizens had public lives that were structured like theater performances. Toga for this, tunic for that. Every piece of clothing told the world who you were: your job, your class, your mood. But at night, Roman philosopher Seneca described how powerful men, like the senators of Rome, would peel off every layer of status at the end of the day. It wasn't just about undressing the body. It was about undressing the soul. A senator would remove his heavy wool toga, step out of his leather sandals, and lie bare beneath thin sheets, no matter the weather. For the Romans, sleeping naked was a kind of reset, a way to return to nature, to remind the mind that beneath all the roles, all the politics, all the lies and betrayals, you were just a body. Flesh and blood, vulnerable, mortal. It was humbling, but there was something else. The Romans believed night sweat was important for health. Physicians like Galen argued that the body purged toxins through the skin while sleeping. Clothes, they said, trapped the bad vapors. So people, especially the elite, slept barefoot. It was a nightly detox. The skin had to breathe, just like the lungs. Some even thought disease came from clothing holding onto miasma, bad air that caused sickness. In Roman bathhouses, the attendants would warn you, don't wrap yourself up too tightly at night. Let the skin cleanse itself. Now jump to the medieval period. This is where things get even stranger. By the 12th century, Christian monks were writing rules about how to sleep, and nakedness became part of religious humility. Some monastic orders insisted that you sleep naked on purpose. Why? To remind yourself of Adam and Eve, cast out of paradise. It was a punishment for pride, but also a spiritual reset. Imagine cold stone floors, the smell of wax from a guttering candle, and the silence of a medieval cloister as dozens of monks lie down in their bare skin, thinking of sin, death, and the fragile body. The idea was simple: strip away worldly pleasures, even warmth, even fabric. Go to sleep as a humble creature. But outside the monasteries, ordinary people also had reasons to sleep naked. For one, lice and fleas, bedbugs. Medieval homes were filthy. If you wore your day clothes to bed, the lice multiplied. Removing your garments gave your skin a break and made it easier to spot crawling pests. Some people even hung their clothes over smoky fires at night to kill the lice while they slept. Then there was the economy of fabric. Until the Industrial Revolution, making cloth was incredibly expensive. For many peasants, owning one good tunic was a luxury. You didn't wear it to bed because you didn't want tourists damaging it. Nightshirts came later, but in early medieval times, sleeping naked was practical. You kept your only clothes dry and clean for the next day's labor. In some cultures, sleeping naked had medicinal purposes. The 16th century medical text, Regiment of Health, advised people to sleep with bare skin exposed to temperate airs to balance the body's humors. They thought too much heat trapped in clothing caused fevers or melancholy. Sleep was a nightly therapy. But here's where things get even weirder. In the Middle Ages, there was a belief in night demons, spirits like the succubus and incubus, that would visit sleepers and steal their energy or cause nightmares. Oddly enough, sleeping naked was seen by some as protection. Why? Because it symbolized innocence. Think of a baby, no clothes, no sin. Some believed that if you slept naked, spirits would pass you by, thinking you were pure and harmless. Others thought the reverse, that demons were attracted to nakedness. It depended on the region. In Germany, some would sleep naked, but wrap a small iron charm in their hand, just in case. Asterisk, now think of ancient Egypt. In the heat of the Nile Valley, people slept with almost nothing on, not just because of the temperature, but because of ritual cleanliness. Egyptians believed in the power of daily purification. Clothing carried the dust of the world. At night, you cleansed your body, oiled your skin, and lay down free from the day's contamination. Imagine the soft glow of oil lamps flickering against white limestone walls as a priest removes his linen kilt, washes his hands, and lies down bare under the open sky, listening to the desert wind. For Egyptians, the body wasn't dirty. It was sacred. Sleep was not a time of shame, but of return to a pure state. In Japan, things were different, but no less fascinating. During the Edo period, communal baths were common, and modesty around the body was different from today's Western ideas. People bathed at night, then slept with minimal clothing or none at all, especially in summer. The Japanese believed that sleeping too warm disturbed the ki, the life force. Nighttime was about balance, yin and yang. You needed to let the body cool naturally. Many Japanese homes had no heating at all, so families would huddle together under shared blankets, skin to skin, not for sexuality but for warmth and bonding. Meanwhile, in Viking culture, sleeping naked was also linked to battle readiness. Sounds strange? Stay with me. Vikings had a concept called death sleep, the idea that every night's sleep could be your last, especially during raids or war seasons. By sleeping naked, you symbolically surrender to fate. If you died in the night, you met the gods as your true self, unarmored, unadorned. Some Viking sagas describe warriors stripping down before sleep to test their courage, not just in battle, but in the vulnerability of the body. So, is that the whole story? Not even close, because there's a darker side to this history. In some periods, people were forced to sleep naked as punishment, humiliation, or control. In prisons, in slavery, in boarding schools and workhouses. Sometimes nakedness at night wasn't a choice, it was imposed. And that, too, is part of the historical record we need to remember. But tonight, as you listen, think of the thousands of years when humanity slipped into sleep without cloth barriers between skin and air. Why? Because the night wasn't just about rest. It was about shedding roles, healing the body, balancing the spirit, and preparing for the unknown dreams to come. As we go deeper into this story, we'll explore even stranger reasons why people chose or were forced to sleep naked. There's more, much more. Stay with me. Think you've heard all the reasons why people slept naked in history? Think again. We haven't even scratched the surface. In this next chapter of the story, let's peel back another layer of human life. The strange nighttime rituals, the whispered fears, and the secret customs that never made it into most history books. Imagine this. It's the 18th century, and you're in a European city like Paris or London. Gaslights flicker in the streets outside. Inside, your bedroom is lit only by a single candle, melting down slowly as the minutes pass. But here's the twist. Despite the cold stone walls and the chilly air sneaking in through the windows, you remove every piece of clothing before slipping into bed. You aren't doing this to feel sexy. You aren't doing it for health, necessarily. You're doing it because the doctors told you to. In fact, throughout the Enlightenment, physicians recommended sleeping naked to prevent night suffocation. That was the term they used for the mysterious deaths that happened when people simply stopped breathing in the night, a phenomenon we now sometimes call sleep apnea or sudden cardiac death. Back then, no one understood it, so the advice was simple: don't let your chest be constricted by night clothes. Let the air move freely around your lungs. Some people took this so seriously that they slept with the windows open in the dead of winter, fully exposed to the cold, believing fresh air could ward off death. But let's get even stranger. Did you know there were laws in some places that told you how you were allowed to sleep? In certain Puritan communities in colonial America, sleeping arrangements were monitored for morality. If a man and woman shared a bed without being married, it was a scandal. But here's the odd part. Sometimes young couples would be allowed to sleep together as part of a courtship ritual called bundling. They'd be wrapped in separate blankets or divided by a wooden board in the bed. Yet, despite this division, some communities insisted that both people had to strip down to their underlayers or even be fully naked, because that was considered more honest. Clothes could hide sneaky touches, but bare skin was supposed to. Keep things innocent, because you'd be too embarrassed to cross the line. This idea sounds bizarre today, but it was part of a larger belief that honesty happened when nothing was hidden. Nakedness was supposed to enforce boundaries, not break them. Imagine the awkwardness. Two young people, lying in a cold bed, entirely bare, talking quietly through the night, hoping not to break social rules. But let's go even further back in time. In ancient Greece, nudity wasn't always associated. With Shane Dot, it was celebrated in many cases. Athletes trained and competed in the nude. Philosophers discussed ideas in gymnasiums while naked, and artists sculpted idealized human bodies without clothes. Sleep was just another realm where the Greeks let the body exist in its natural form. There was a word for this kind of life, gymnos, meaning naked. But even in Greece, sleeping without clothes carried layers of symbolism. The philosopher Diogenes famously slept in a clay barrel, wearing nothing, as a protest against materialism. He believed true wisdom came from rejecting comforts, and for him, nakedness was a statement. I need nothing from society, not even clothes for sleep. Now, consider the role of climate. In tropical regions, naked sleep was often just survival. In humid parts of Africa, India, and Southeast Asia, wearing clothing at night traps sweat and heat, leading to fungal infections, skin diseases, and unbearable discomfort. People learned that the body regulated itself better when unwrapped. And this knowledge passed through generations, becoming a normal part of life. Colonial European travelers often wrote letters home describing their shock at how freely people slept naked in foreign lands. But they failed to understand the practical reasons behind it. For the local people, it wasn't strange, it was necessary. Yet in colder regions, there was a different logic. Among the Sami people of the Arctic, for example, communal sleep was common. Entire families would huddle together under reindeer skins or woolen blankets. Sometimes they removed inner layers to conserve shared warmth. Skin-to-skin contact prevented hypothermia better than layered clothing. This wasn't about modesty or shame it was about survival. In this context, nakedness became a tool, not a taboo. But let's not forget the darker chapters of this history. There were times when sleeping naked wasn't a choice, but a condition forced on people through poverty or control. In workhouses of 19th century Britain, the poor were often denied nightclothes as a way to break their spirit. The idea was that comfort led to laziness, so the solution was to make sleep as bare and uncomfortable as possible. This practice extended to prisons, where inmates were stripped before sleep to prevent escape attempts or hidden contraband. In these cases, naked sleep wasn't about health or ritual. It was about power, punishment, and control. Even in military history, sleeping without clothes played a role. Roman soldiers sometimes slept naked in their tents because armor and heavy clothing could cause chafing and infection if worn too long. They needed to air out their bodies. On the other hand, medieval knights often slept in partial armor during campaigns, but back at their castles, they stripped down completely, believing that a knight must rest his body to prepare for battle. Some texts even warned that knights who wore clothes to bed risked becoming weak, because the body needed to breathe freely at night to maintain strength. And then there's the story of sleepwalking. Historical records from the 1700s and 1800s show a rise in reports of naked sleepwalkers wandering the streets at night. In some towns, watchmen were tasked with gently guiding these vulnerable people back to their homes without causing embarrassment. Sleepwalking was seen as a kind of nighttime possession, an ancient belief that the soul wandered when the body was at rest. The fact that many of these sleepwalkers were found naked added to the mystery and fear. Was it a sign of madness? A spiritual experience? Or just a side effect of sleeping unclothed and vulnerable? We may never know. But let's shift to the world of love and marriage. For centuries, wedding night rituals involved specific instructions about how couples should sleep. In some cultures, the first night was spent entirely unclothed, but not for physical intimacy, rather. It was a public statement of union. In medieval Europe, newlyweds were sometimes escorted to bed by family members and undressed in front of witnesses to prove the marriage was consummated. After the awkward ceremony, they were left to sleep together, often too nervous or exhausted to do anything but lie side by side, naked and quiet, waiting for morning. This practice, known as bedding the couple, faded over time but remained part of folklore and tradition in many places. But what about dreams? Some ancient cultures believed that clothing interfered with dreaming. The body's energy, they thought, needed to be free for the soul to travel in sleep. In parts of ancient China, Taoist practitioners sometimes slept naked during spiritual retreats to encourage lucid dreaming and out-of-body experiences. The idea was that fabric tethered the spirit to the material world, letting go of clothes. At night symbolized letting go of earthly ties. Even today, some meditation practices recommend sleeping with minimal clothing to enhance dream clarity. And let's not forget the role of disease. During plagues and pandemics, people changed their sleeping habits in strange ways. In the 14th century, during the Black Death, some thought that sleeping naked could prevent infection because clothes trapped the plague air. Others did the opposite, wrapping themselves tightly to avoid exposure. Medical advice was contradictory, but fear drove people to experiment with their nightly routines in desperate attempts to survive. In Victorian times, doctors warned against too much bedding and too many layers at night. They argued that tight nightgowns and heavy quilts led to night palpitations and vapors, vague terms for what we now call anxiety or panic attacks. During sleep, the solution? Lighten the load. Sleep with less. Sleep, perhaps, without anything at all. And then there's the psychology of it. Modern studies have shown that sleeping without clothes can reduce cortisol levels, the stress hormone, and improve mood upon waking. But ancient people didn't need scientific studies to know this. They felt it. Night was a time to return to the most basic state of being. A body breathing, skin against air, nothing else. Some cultures believed that sleeping naked reconnected you to the earth. In parts of pre-Columbian America, people slept directly on the ground, bare-skinned, believing it allowed the body to absorb healing energies from the soil. This practice, called grounding today, has roots in very old traditions. And let's not forget the practical side, laundry. Before washing machines, cleaning clothes was backbreaking work. You didn't dirty your sleeping clothes unnecessarily. If you could avoid nightwear, you did. Fewer garments meant fewer hours spent scrubbing at the riverbank or beating cloth with rocks. So what does all this tell us? That sleeping naked wasn't just about personal choice. It was about culture, climate, economy, religion, medicine, and mystery. Every night, across centuries and continents, humans have shed their day layers and returned to a more primal state. Whether for health, ritual, or survival, the act of lying down unclothed became part of the rhythm of life. And yet, we've only begun to uncover the layers of this story. There's much more too. Come. If you thought the reasons for sleeping naked in history were strange so far, wait until you hear this next part, because the story is about to get darker, more secretive, and a little more forbidden. Imagine the middle of the night in a small, medieval village or an 18th century city when the streets are quiet, the candles are burned low, and the only people awake are the night watchers, the guards who patrol the streets while everyone else is asleep. These night watchers didn't just keep an eye out for thieves or fires. They also kept track of scandalous behavior. And one of the most whispered about scandals in old towns wasn't just adultery or gambling. It was who was seen sleeping naked, and with whom. In communities where modesty was public law, nudity at night became a kind of secret rebellion. Couples who weren't supposed to be together would strip down not only for intimacy, but for a symbolic shedding of society's rules. Forbidden lovers. Across centuries often chose to sleep naked as a statement. No walls, no secrets between us except the biggest secret of all, which was their relationship itself. This idea shows up in court records, in confessions to priests, and even in old songs sung quietly by farmers and servants after dark. But the risks were real. In Puritan New England, for example, people caught lying together unclothed could face public punishment stocks, whippings, or worse. In some cases, these punishments were doled out even if the two people involved weren't touching. Just the act of being naked together in bed was considered a crime. And yet, the practice continued, passed in whispers from one generation to the next. But it wasn't just about love affairs. There were superstitions tied to naked sleep that lingered in the shadows of society. In Eastern Europe, during the 1600s, for example, some believed that if you slept naked under the full moon, your dreams would come true, but only if you spoke them aloud before sunrise. Others believed that sleeping naked during a thunderstorm could protect you from being struck by lightning because, as the logic went, metal buttons and fasteners attracted the storm god's anger. So by removing all clothes, you made yourself invisible to the sky's wrath. Some old texts even suggest that witches practiced naked sleep as part of their nighttime rituals. In grimoires, the magic books of the Middle Ages, there are instructions. For spell work that could only be done at midnight, in complete darkness, and with the practitioner unclothed. Why? Because clothes were believed to interfere with the flow of magic, trapping the body's natural energy. To release power into the world, you had to be as you were born, bare and open to the elements. And speaking of magic, there were rumors of dream thieves, spirits, or sorcerers who would steal your good dreams and replace them with nightmares. In some cultures, the way to protect yourself was to sleep without clothes. because the naked body was thought to be less vulnerable to psychic attack. Why? The belief was that clothing acted like a net, catching bad energies and holding them close to the skin. By sleeping bare, you let those energies pass through you harmlessly, like wind through a tree. But not everyone believed this. In parts of Scotland and Ireland, people would wrap themselves tightly at night, even in summer, to avoid attracting the night hags, supernatural beings said to ride on the chests of sleepers, causing paralysis and terrifying dreams. This is one of the earliest descriptions of what we now call sleep paralysis. And interestingly, many historical reports of sleep paralysis involve the victim being found naked or partly unclothed, whether by choice or by some mysterious force, adding to the folklore. In cities like London during the 17th century, there were other dangers to consider. Fire. A Great Fire of London in 1666 started in the middle of the night, and many people fled their homes in whatever state they had been sleeping, which, for many, meant naked. Samuel Pepys, the famous diarist, wrote in his journal about people running into the streets without clothes, trying to save their lives while covering themselves with blankets or curtains torn from the windows. This event left a deep mark on cultural memory, and for years afterward, people debated whether it was safer to sleep naked, ready for health and comfort, or clothed, ready to escape disaster. Some historians believe this is one reason why nightshirts became more popular in the late 1600s, not just for modesty, but for emergency preparedness. But let's return to the idea of communal sleeping, which was common in many parts of the world for centuries. In medieval inns, travelers often shared beds with strangers. This was called a bedfellow system, and it was not unusual for 2 or 3 people to sleep in the same bed to save space and warmth. Sometimes this meant sleeping naked together, especially if they came from regions where that was normal. Diaries from travelers during the Renaissance mention the awkwardness of sharing beds with strangers in the nude, but it was considered just part of life on the road. In Japan's Edo period, travelers staying in small inns called hatago would often bathe together in public baths before retiring to shared sleeping areas with minimal clothing or none at all, especially in hot seasons. There was no shame in this. It was part of the cultural understanding of the body and nature. Meanwhile, in colder places, entire families slept together, sometimes unclothed under layers of blankets to conserve warmth. But this practice led to complex social rules about where and how people could touch each other in the night, especially between adults and children, or between unrelated people sharing a bed. In some households, strict boundaries were drawn, even in naked sleep. People learned to sleep back to back, or in specific positions, to avoid misunderstandings. And then there's the question of sleep hygiene, not in the modern sense of bedtime routines, but literal cleanliness. In times when bathing was rare, some believed that airing out the body at night was essential to prevent disease. In fact, in the 18th century, some doctors recommended that patients who couldn't afford regular baths should at least sleep naked to allow the skin to refresh itself overnight. They believed this was especially important for the lower classes, who worked in dirty environments during the day. But of course, in practice, this often led to more exposure to cold and illness, creating a cycle of mixed medical advice. And here's another layer: dreams and prophecy. In ancient Mesopotamia, dream interpreters wrote on clay tablets about the importance of sleeping, as the gods made you, meaning, naked before attempting to receive visions. They believed that clothes carried the residue of the day's emotions and tasks, and that by sleeping naked, you opened yourself to pure, clearer dreams. The same idea appears in ancient Hebrew texts, where prophets are sometimes described as sleeping or even praying without clothes during visions, symbolizing total openness to divine messages. Across cultures, the idea repeats. to meet the spirit world, you had to remove the symbols of human life, clothing, jewelry, even hair in some cases. Only then could you cross the boundary between waking and dreaming without interference. But let's not forget the role of status. In some societies, sleeping naked was a sign of wealth and privilege, not poverty. Why? Because it meant you had the luxury of a private space. In crowded homes, only the rich could afford their bedrooms, where they could undress without fear of being seen. So, while today we might think of pajamas or silk robes as luxurious, in some historical contexts, true luxury was the ability to sleep without anything at all, safely behind closed doors. In contrast, the poor often slept in communal spaces where modesty demanded at least some covering. But in the private bedrooms of the elite, being naked in sleep was part of life's privileges. Let's jump forward to the early 20th century, when doctors like Sigmund Freud began to analyze the symbolism of nakedness in dreams. Freud believed that sleeping without clothes was connected to deeper psychological truths, the desire to return to childhood innocence, or to experience vulnerability without consequence. He argued that the human mind craves moments of total exposure, but in controlled environments like sleep, where no one is watching. This idea influenced Western culture in subtle ways, leading to the modern association between naked sleep and personal freedom. But even in Freud's time, not everyone agreed. Some Victorian thinkers believed that sleeping without clothes was dangerous, not just physically, but morally. They worried that it encouraged sinful thoughts or sexual desires, even if the sleeper was alone. This led to a boom in nightwear production, with elaborate pajamas and nightgowns designed to cover the body fully, even in private. Yet, beneath these layers of cloth, many people continued the old practice, secretly preferring the freedom of skin against sheet. And what about today? Studies show that around 1/3 of adults in Western countries sometimes sleep naked, often for reasons not so different from those of the past: comfort, temperature control, intimacy, and health. But the history behind this simple act is anything but simple. It's a woven tapestry of superstition, survival, rebellion, and ritual. And we're not done yet. In the next part, we'll dive into the role of nighttime ceremonies, how different cultures connected naked sleep to the cycles of the moon, and why some ancient warriors believed sleeping naked could make you stronger. Stay with me. The strangest parts of the story are still to come. If you've stayed with me this far, you're probably wondering, could there be even stranger reasons for sleeping naked in history? The answer is yes, and the next layer of this story will take you into ancient warrior rituals, moonlit ceremonies, and beliefs so unusual they might change how you think about sleep forever. Let's begin with the warriors of Sparta, one of the most disciplined military societies in ancient history. Spartans believed that sleeping naked toughened the body and steeled the mind. From childhood, Spartan boys were trained to sleep without clothes, even in freezing conditions, as part of their agoge, their brutal education system designed to create fearless soldiers. To them, nighttime nakedness wasn't about comfort. It was about resilience. If you could survive the cold stone floors and harsh wind while unclothed, you could survive anything on the battlefield. Spartan commanders even inspected the boys at night to ensure they weren't secretly covering themselves. It was a test of willpower, a way to teach the lesson. If you can master your body, you can master fear. But the Spartans weren't alone in this belief. Across the sea, in ancient Celtic cultures, some warriors practiced what was called guess, sacred vows or taboos that governed behavior. Some of these taboos involved sleeping naked before battle to show the gods that you trusted them fully. The idea was simple but profound. By removing all physical protection at night, you symbolically surrendered your life to fate, acknowledging that death could come at any time. To the Celts, courage wasn't just about how you fought, it was about how you slept. But warriors weren't the only ones who linked naked sleep to ritual power. In ancient Mesoamerican cultures, certain priests and healers practiced night ceremonies that involved sleeping without clothes under specific moon phases. Why? Because they believed the body absorbed lunar energy through the skin. The full moon was thought to fill the body with strength, while the new moon helped cleanse. The soul of impurities. Sleeping naked during these phases was like opening a window to the universe, letting in power or releasing spiritual toxins. Some even mixed this practice with herbal rituals, placing leaves or flowers under their pillows to enhance dream visions, while their skin soaked in the moon's silent light. In other cultures, this connection between nature and the body took on different forms. Among the Native American Lakota people, vision quests often included sleeping alone, sometimes naked, in the wilderness as a way to strip away the distractions of civilization. The idea was to become one with the earth, to feel the grass, the air, the cold, and the heat directly against the skin, removing all barriers between the self and the natural world. This practice wasn't about comfort. It was about humility and openness to spiritual insight. But let's move from the wilderness to the ancient temples of India, where yogis and ascetics practiced a form of naked meditation called Digambara, which means clothed by the sky. While this was more common in meditation than sleep, some yogis extended the practice into their sleeping hours, believing that total detachment from possessions, including clothing, was necessary to reach enlightenment. They saw the naked body as pure, not sinful, and by sleeping unclothed under the open sky, they symbolically united with the cosmos. Imagine lying beneath a canopy of stars, feeling the cool breeze against your skin, believing that each breath connects you to something eternal. But not all naked sleep was spiritual or noble. Sometimes it was practical, and sometimes it was dangerously political. In the Ottoman Empire, for example, the Sultan's harem had strict rules about what could be worn at night. Women were often required to sleep naked to prevent them from hiding weapons or secret letters in their clothing. This was part of a broader system of control, where even sleep was monitored to maintain political security. The same practice was reported in royal courts across the world, where kings and queens sometimes demanded that their closest servants sleep naked to prove loyalty or prevent assassination plots. Imagine the paranoia, trusting no one, not even in sleep. But let's turn back to more personal stories, like the diaries of travelers and explorers who documented their experiences of sleeping naked in foreign lands. In the 19th century, British explorers in Africa and Polynesia often wrote shock descriptions of entire villages sleeping without clothes. What they failed to realize was that in many of these places, the climate made it not only comfortable but necessary. In the tropics, night clothes trap heat and sweat, leading to skin diseases. Sleeping naked wasn't about exotic behavior, it was about survival. Yet, these writings fueled stereotypes that lingered for generations, misunderstanding cultural practices through the lens of colonial bias. But what about Europe during the same period? Interestingly, even in Victorian England, the era we think of as the height of modesty, there were secret trends towards sleeping without clothes. Some members of the upper class, influenced by new ideas about health and natural living, began to experiment with what they called air baths. This involved walking around the bedroom or sleeping entirely unclothed, with windows open to let in fresh air. They believed this practice improved circulation, balanced the humors, and prevented disease. Writers like Henry David Thoreau and Benjamin Franklin also practiced air baths, promoting the idea of morning or evening nakedness as a health routine. Franklin famously wrote letters describing how he sat naked in his room every morning, letting the air cool his skin while he read or wrote. This wasn't considered perverse or scandalous in his mind. It was about aligning the body with nature. And yet, These practices were kept private, whispered about, but rarely admitted publicly because of social expectations. But let's get back to sleep and the rituals that surrounded it. In medieval Europe, there was a belief that how you slept could influence how you woke up, not just physically, but spiritually. For example, it was thought that if you slept naked on certain saints' days, you would receive divine visions in your dreams. There are records of people lying down unclothed on church floors during religious festivals, hoping for healing or prophecy. In some cases, they believed that exposing the skin to holy places or relics during sleep allowed the soul to absorb blessings more directly. This idea carried into folk medicine, where specific cures involved sleeping naked in special places. In parts of rural England, people suffering from fevers were told to sleep without clothes under an oak tree or on a stone altar to sweat out the sickness. The connection between skin, earth, and healing was deeply embedded in cultural beliefs. But let's not forget the fears attached to this practice. For centuries, people worried that sleeping naked made them vulnerable to spiritual attack. In Jewish folklore, there's a creature called the Lilith night spirits who prey on sleepers. Some believed that sleeping unclothed invited these spirits, making the body an easier target for mischief or harm. To protect themselves, people sometimes slept with small charms or amulets sewn into their pillows, even if they chose to sleep bare. Others recited protective prayers before removing their clothes at night, creating a ritual barrier between themselves and the unseen world. And then there's the question of say, not the act itself, but the symbolism. In many cultures, the marriage bed was considered a sacred space where nakedness was part of a contract, not just between two people, but between them and the divine. In ancient Rome, newlyweds sometimes wore special amulets while sleeping unclothed to protect against envy and the evil eye. The belief was that vulnerability in the marital bed required spiritual armor of a different kind, not fabric, but magic. In some parts of Africa, couples performed nighttime rituals that involved removing all clothing and speaking vows aloud while lying side by side, reinforcing their bond not just to each other, but to the community and the ancestors. These ceremonies often took place in the quiet hours before dawn, when the world was still and the veil between the living and the spirit world was thought to be thinnest. And let's talk about body temperature, which has always played a role in sleep habits. Modern science tells us that cooling the body slightly before sleep helps trigger melatonin release, the hormone that makes you drowsy. Ancient people may not have known the term melatonin, but they understood the feeling. That's why, in many historical periods, people removed clothing at night, even in chilly climates, trusting their bodies to adapt. Studies show that skin temperature drops naturally during sleep, and removing clothes can help regulate this process. But there's another layer: control and discipline. In monastic traditions, sleeping naked was sometimes a form of ascetic practice, a way to deny comfort and keep the body humble. In Christian monasteries, monks were sometimes forbidden from wearing soft fabrics at night, and in some orders, they slept on hard floors unclothed to remind themselves of their mortality. The idea was that death comes for the body, not the clothes, so better to get used to discomfort now and face it unprepared later. This practice echoed through time, influencing spiritual seekers for centuries. And still, the simplest reason of all remains: the sensation of skin against air, the release from the constraints of fabric, the feeling of returning, if only for a few hours, to the body's most natural state. Tonight, as you lie listening to this, you might wonder, how many generations before you did the same thing, slipping out of their garments and into the mysteries of sleep, trusting the night to hold them bare? In the next part of our story, we'll go deeper into sleep disorders, dreams, and the ways people believe nakedness could affect the mind during rest. We'll uncover tales of somnambulists, ghostly visions, and even ancient cures for nightmares that involve sleeping without clothes. Stay with me. The night still has more secrets to share. If you thought this journey into naked sleep was already strange, prepare for something even more mysterious, because in this next chapter, we'll explore how people in history believed that sleeping naked could change not just the body, but the mind. We're talking about dreams, sleepwalking, night terrors, and even possession states of consciousness that terrified and fascinated humans for thousands of years. Let's begin with the medieval phenomenon of the somnambulist, the sleepwalker. In old European towns, stories circulated about people rising from their beds in the dead of night, wandering the streets, often without any clothes, eyes wide open, but minds still trapped in sleep. These nocturnal wanderers were thought to be caught between worlds, neither fully awake nor fully dreaming, and their nakedness added to the eerie quality of the sight. Some believed that if you walked naked during sleep, your soul was exposed to the moon's influence, or worse, to spirits waiting in the dark. People told tales of sleepwalkers who climbed rooftops or wandered into rivers, guided by unseen hands. But here's where the history gets even more curious. There were documented medical beliefs that sleeping naked increased the risk of sleepwalking. Physicians in the 16th and 17th centuries argued that the cool air against bare skin caused the body to release vapors that disturbed the humors, the ancient idea of bodily fluids controlling health and mood. They believed these vapors rose to the brain at night, triggering strange behaviors like walking, talking, or even eating while still asleep. Remedies were suggested. Some advised placing rosemary under the pillow. Others recommended sleeping with iron charms near the bed to anchor the soul and prevent nighttime wandering. But for many, the solution was to avoid nakedness at night, believing that clothes kept the spirit tethered to the body, reducing the risk of ghostly excursions. Yet in other regions, the opposite belief existed. In parts of rural Italy, for example, people thought that sleeping naked reduced the chances of being possessed during sleep because the spirits preferred to enter people who were tangled in fabrics. The logic was this: clothes trapped energy, and that trapped energy created openings for malevolent forces. So to sleep naked was to let the bad vapors escape harmlessly into the air, protecting the sleeper from attack. This idea surfaces again in early Islamic texts, where some scholars debated whether sleeping unclothed allowed the jinn, supernatural beings made of smokeless fire, to interact with humans more easily. Some advised always sleeping with at least a sheet, while others believed that pure intentions, not fabric, were the true protection. Meanwhile, in Jewish mysticism, there was a practice called kavanah, or focused intention, used before sleep. Some mystics chose to sleep naked during certain rituals to symbolize returning the soul to God during the night, trusting that they would be protected by faith rather than fabric. But beyond spiritual risks, people in history worried about nightmares, and they believed that clothing could either cause or prevent them. In medieval Europe, some physicians warned that tight or heavy night clothes pressed against the chest and caused incubus dreams, where the sleeper felt a weight on their body and woke gasping for breath. Today, we call this sleep paralysis. But back then, it was explained as an actual demon, the incubus or succubus, sitting on the sleeper's chest. To prevent these terrifying experiences, some doctors advised sleeping naked to free the lungs and prevent night suffocation. Others said the opposite, that clothing formed a shield against invisible forces. This contradiction reveals how little people understood about the mechanics of sleep, but it also shows how deeply nakedness was tied to ideas about vulnerability. And the confusion wasn't just in Europe. In ancient China, the Taoist philosopher Zhuangzi wrote about dreams where he became a butterfly, unsure if he was truly a man dreaming of being a butterfly or a butterfly dreaming of being a man. This concept of shifting between realities was linked to sleep rituals that sometimes involved removing clothing to symbolize letting go of the material world. Some Taoist monks even practiced dream yoga, training themselves to stay conscious while dreaming. And part of their preparation involved meditating naked before sleep to disconnect from earthly distractions. Similar practices existed in Tibetan Buddhism, where dream yogis used specific breathing techniques and body positions, sometimes unclothed, to control their dreams and travel through dream landscapes with awareness. In these traditions, nakedness wasn't about shame, it was about clarity. But not everyone pursued dreams voluntarily. In many cultures, people feared night spirits who manipulated dreams. In West Africa, the Ashanti people told stories of the Asambosam, a vampire-like creature that attacked sleepers in the night, often targeting those who were naked because their bodies were easier to pierce with claws. Protective charms were worn around the neck or ankles, and sometimes special oils were rubbed on the skin before bed to ward off these beings. In Eastern Europe, there was a belief in the Mora, a spirit that crept into bedrooms to sit on people's chests, stealing their breath. Again, sleeping naked was seen as both a risk and a defense. Some believed the Mora was attracted to bare skin, while others thought clothes trapped the creature inside the bed. To confuse things further, some remedies involved switching sleep positions or wearing garments inside out, but a reflection of how desperate people were to avoid nighttime terror. But let's leave fear behind for a moment and talk about love. In Renaissance Italy, there was a practice called amorosi sogni, or love dreams, where people believed they could attract their desired partner by sleeping naked under a full moon, while thinking of that person's name. This ritual involved a specific series of steps: bathing in rose water, lying on silk sheets, and whispering the name of the beloved 3 times before closing the eyes. The belief was that the moon would carry the dream message to the intended person, creating a psychic connection. Similar traditions existed in parts of India, where ancient texts like the Kama Sutra mention nighttime meditations done unclothed to foster intimacy and spiritual connection, not just physical pleasure. But let's not forget the role of science. During the Enlightenment, physicians began to study sleep more systematically, and they experimented with various methods to improve rest. Some doctors, like Christoph Wilhelm Huffland, a pioneer of geriatric medicine, recommended naked sleep to prolong life. He argued that clothing at night weakened the skin's ability to regulate temperature, leading to premature aging. His book, The Art of Prolonging Life, became popular among European aristocrats, sparking a trend of natural sleep practices. This included not just sleeping naked, but also sleeping outdoors when possible, exposing the body to fresh air and the rhythms of nature. But this trend wasn't universally accepted. Religious leaders often pushed back, warning that such practices led to moral decay. Sermons were preached against the naked sleep fad, claiming it encouraged sinful thoughts and weakened societal discipline. Yet the practice continued, quietly, behind closed doors. Even in Victorian England, where propriety ruled, people secretly shed their layers at night, enjoying the simple freedom of skin against sheet. And then came the rise of psychology. Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, and others began to analyze dreams more deeply, interpreting symbols and unconscious desires. They noted that dreams of nakedness often reflected feelings of vulnerability or exposure. But interestingly, they also found that people who slept naked reported different dream patterns than those who slept clothed. Some said their dreams were more vivid, more intense, as if the lack of barriers between body and air somehow opened the mind. Whether this is scientifically true is still debated, but the historical reports are there in letters, diaries, and medical journals. And what about nightmares? In medieval Japan, people believed that evil spirits called Yure caused bad dreams. To prevent this, some slept naked but placed a sword or dagger under the pillow, symbolically cutting through the spirit world's interference. The steel was thought to ward off ghosts, while the bare body signaled innocence and openness, creating a paradoxical mix of defense and vulnerability. In Russia, folk tales speak of the domovoi, a household spirit who could either protect or torment sleepers. To stay in the domovoi's good graces, some families left offerings at night, milk, bread, or coins, and sometimes slept naked to show respect for the spirit's ancient role as guardian of the home. The idea was that by stripping away worldly layers, you showed humility and trust, inviting the domovoi to watch over you. And in the Americas, both North and South, indigenous peoples had their nighttime customs. Among the Mapuche of Chile, healers known as Machi sometimes performed nighttime rituals unclothed, lying on the ground to communicate with spirits through dreams. They believed that clothing interfered with the earth's messages, and that only by exposing the skin could they receive true visions. Among the Navajo, stories were told of skinwalkers, shapeshifters who stole skins to take other forms. This belief made some cautious about what they wore to bed, preferring to sleep with minimal or no clothing so that no evil being could steal their essence during the night. All of these practices point to a deeper truth. For most of human history, sleep wasn't just rest, it was a journey into another world, and the way you prepared for that journey mattered. Clothes were part of that preparation, or the lack of them. Whether for health, magic, love, or survival, the act of sleeping naked carried meanings far beyond comfort. Tonight, as you listen to this, consider how many generations before you have grappled with the same nighttime questions. How do I keep my body safe? How do I protect my mind from bad dreams? How do I prepare for the unknown hours between sunset and sunrise? In the next part of this story, we'll explore how nighttime rituals, weather, war, and even royalty influenced the way people approached naked sleep. We'll dive into the strange customs of kings and queens, the secret rules of servants, and the whispers of scandal that shaped bedroom life for centuries. Stay with me. The history of sleep is far from over. If you're still listening, you might be wondering, what about royalty? Surely kings and queens, with their silk sheets and golden chambers, didn't sleep naked like peasants or warriors, right? But here's the strange truth. In many royal courts throughout history, the rules of nighttime were just as complicated, and sometimes even more revealing, than those of the common people. In fact, for centuries, the bedrooms of monarchs were political stages, where sleep rituals, including what was worn or not worn, played a role in maintaining power, proving legitimacy, and controlling public perception. Let's start with the court of Louis XIV, the Sun King of France. Louis famously slept in a public ritual called the lever and coucher, the rising and going to bed ceremonies. Every evening, a small audience of courtiers gathered to watch. The king undressed, step by step, until he was left in nothing but his linen nightshirt. But according to some private records, there were nights when Louis slept naked beneath his sheets, especially during the sweltering Parisian summers. This wasn't just personal preference. It was tied to the 17th century medical belief in letting the body breathe. Royal physicians recommended periods of skin exposure to balance the humors and prevent disease. Of course, the king's bedroom wasn't truly private. There were always servants present, so even naked sleep became part of a carefully managed image. And Louis wasn't the only monarch with such rituals. In England, the Tudor and Stuart courts also had public bedtime ceremonies. Queen Elizabeth I was dressed and undressed by her ladies-in-waiting, who often recorded details of her undergarments or lack thereof in private letters and diaries. Some of these writings hint at the queen occasionally sleeping without clothes, particularly during bouts of illness when doctors prescribed air baths for skin health. In these moments, the royal body was no longer just a political symbol. It became a fragile, human thing, subject to the same needs and fears as anyone else. But in the world of servants, nighttime rules were even stranger. In some royal households, chambermaids and valets were required to sleep lightly clothed or even naked under certain circumstances, not for comfort, but for control. Why? Because it prevented theft. If a servant was found fully dressed at night, it suggested they might be planning to escape with stolen goods. By enforcing minimal or no clothing during sleep, masters ensured their servants were unprepared to flee suddenly or hide contraband. This practice wasn't limited to palaces. It extended to wealthy households throughout Europe and parts of Asia. In 18th century China, concubines in the Forbidden City were often required to sleep without clothes, partly to symbolize purity and partly to prevent them from smuggling messages or poisons that could threaten the emperor's life. The vulnerability of naked sleep became a tool of state security. But let's step back from politics and look at weather, a factor that shapes sleeping habits more than you might think. In ancient Rome, for example, summers were brutally hot. The wealthy elite, who could afford country villas, often escaped the city to sleep in cooler environments. They stripped down to nothing, lying on marble floors or beside fountains, believing that the combination of nakedness and running water kept the body balanced. Medical texts from this era recommended sleeping nude during dog days to avoid overheating, which they believed could lead to fever or madness. Some Romans even placed thin, damp cloths over their bodies while naked, creating an early form of air conditioning. Meanwhile, in colder climates like Scandinavia, sleeping naked was less about health and more about practicality, especially when it came to shared sleeping arrangements. Vikings, for instance, often slept in large communal halls where families huddled together under shared furs and blankets. Removing inner layers before sleep helped conserve warmth by reducing moisture trapped in clothing, which could freeze overnight. Skin-to-skin contact was the most efficient way to retain body heat. This practice wasn't seen as sexual or improper. It was survival. The Norse sagas occasionally mention this kind of sleeping arrangement, usually in passing, as if it were as ordinary as lighting a fire or preparing food. And yet, even in these communal spaces, there were unspoken rules about propriety, where you lay, and how you positioned your body during sleep. Fast forward to the 19th century, and you find another fascinating chapter: the rise of sleepwear. With the Industrial Revolution came mass-produced textiles, making pajamas and nightgowns more affordable. But before this, most people didn't own special clothes for bed. The concept of pajamas came from colonial encounters with India, where British colonizers borrowed the term from the Urdu word pajama, meaning leg garment. In India, loose cotton trousers were worn at night to protect from insects and the heat. The British adopted this style but modified it, turning it into a nighttime fashion statement back in England. However, even as pajamas became popular among the middle and upper classes, many people still preferred sleeping naked, especially in private homes. Medical advice was mixed. Some doctors praised pajamas for preventing colds, while others insisted that sleeping without clothes allowed for better circulation and skin health. Newspapers and etiquette manuals debated the issue, but behind closed doors, the choice often came down to comfort and personal belief. And speaking of beliefs, let's talk about dreams again, specifically prophetic dreams. In ancient Egypt, dream temples existed where people would sleep overnight, hoping to receive visions from the gods. These temples often required participants to undergo purification rituals, including fasting, bathing, and yes, sleeping naked on sacred stone beds. The idea was that by shedding clothes, you remove the barriers between yourself and the divine. Priests interpreted these dreams, using them to guide decisions about health, war, or personal fate. This practice was called incubation, and it wasn't unique to Egypt. Similar traditions existed in Greece at the temples of Asclepius, where sick people slept naked in the hope of receiving healing dreams from the god of medicine. Even today, some modern spiritual retreats mimic these ancient practices, encouraging participants to sleep under the stars without clothing, to reconnect with nature and open their minds to deeper states of consciousness. But let's not forget the role of scandal. In every era, there were moments when naked sleep led to gossip, disgrace, or even legal trouble. In colonial America, for example, Puritan laws strictly regulated behavior, including what people wore to bed. Public punishments were handed out to those caught in bed unclothed with persons not their spouse, regardless of whether anything sexual occurred. Just the act of sharing a bed without clothing was enough to trigger accusations of immorality. Diaries from the time reveal a tension between private comfort and public scrutiny, with many people secretly preferring naked sleep but fearing discovery. And sometimes discovery came in dramatic ways. Fires, floods, or sudden illness could force people into the streets in whatever state they had been sleeping, leading to public embarrassment or scandal. In the diaries of Samuel Pepys, there are multiple entries describing people fleeing London fires or earthquakes without clothes, clutching whatever blankets they could grab. These moments highlight how the private rituals of sleep were always vulnerable to public exposure. But beyond scandal and survival, there's something universal about the practice of sleeping naked. Across cultures and centuries, it represents a return to the most basic human condition, free from the symbols of status, the weight of daily roles, and the expectations of society. At night, whether in a palace or a peasant's hut, humans have always sought the same thing: rest, healing, and maybe a little peace from the chaos of life. Whether wrapped in silk or lying bare on straw, the act of closing one's eyes and drifting into sleep is one of the few things that connects every generation. And tonight, as you lie listening to this story, perhaps in bed yourself, you are part of that long tradition, a thread in the vast tapestry of human nighttime ritual. But we're not finished yet. In the next part of this story, we'll explore how war changed sleep habits, how soldiers in trenches managed their nightly routines, and why some generals believed that sleeping naked made you stronger, braver, or more disciplined. We'll also uncover the strange connections between nighttime vulnerability and courage. Stay with me. There's more to learn about the secret life of sleep. If you've stayed with me this far, you might be wondering, how did soldiers sleep? Surely in the chaos of war, with battlefields looming and enemies nearby, people didn't have the luxury of rituals or comfort, or did they? The truth is more complicated than you'd expect. Throughout history, soldiers, warriors, and commanders developed unique nighttime routines, some of which included sleeping naked or partially unclothed, for reasons that might surprise you. Let's begin with the Roman legions, the most disciplined military force of the ancient world. Roman soldiers marched for miles in heavy armor, their skin chafed raw from the leather and metal plates. By the time they set up camp at night, removing their armor was a relief, but they often went further, stripping down completely before sleep. Roman military manuals, such as those attributed to Victorian, mention the importance of restoring the body to its natural state after a day of physical stress. Soldiers were told to air their skin, heal blisters, and prevent infection by exposing their bodies to the open air at night. Some slept naked to allow wounds to breathe, while others did it to avoid lice, which thrived in sweaty, damp clothes. The idea wasn't about comfort, it was about survival. A soldier who didn't take care of his skin would soon be unable to fight. But let's jump forward to the medieval period. During long campaigns, knights and foot soldiers often slept in their armor because surprise attacks were common. Yet, in the safety of castles or after battles, many knights practiced. Body loosening at night. Chronicles describe warriors removing all garments, including underclothes, to let their bodies recover from the day's constraints. Some believed that if you slept naked after battle, your wounds would heal faster because the body could release. Battle heat, a term they used to describe the internal energy built up from combat. Physicians of the time warned that keeping battle garments on during sleep trapped heat and caused putrefaction of the skin, leading to infection. In monasteries that treated wounded knights, it was standard practice to strip patients completely. Before rest, rubbing their skin with herbal salves and allowing the night air to do its work. And then came the samurai of feudal Japan. Samurai culture emphasized discipline and readiness, but also had strange nighttime customs. Some samurai trained themselves to sleep lightly, barely slipping into full rest so they could wake at the slightest sound. To aid this practice, certain schools of martial arts taught warriors to sleep without clothing, believing that the sensation of air on the skin heightened awareness even in dreams. Samurai who practiced Zen meditation were encouraged to sleep, unclothed during retreats, symbolizing the shedding of ego and the acceptance of death. In their worldview, sleep was a rehearsal for dying. Entering it naked was part of acknowledging life's impermanence. Meanwhile, across the seas in Europe's Napoleonic Wars, soldiers faced different challenges. They slept in muddy trenches, under canvas tents, or on frozen ground. Yet there are letters and journals from this era that describe men removing their uniforms at night, even in winter, to prevent lice infestations. In fact, some soldiers called their lice body comrades because they were so common, but they also knew that stripping naked for brief periods at night, even if only under a cloak, was one of the few ways to reduce the infestation. Soldiers shared tricks: hanging uniforms over smoky fires to kill bugs, sleeping naked under wool blankets to protect the skin without trapping parasites. And during World War I, the trenches of France brought an even stranger kind of sleep. Soldiers lived in filth, but during rest breaks in safer areas behind the front lines, many stripped naked to bathe, dry out, and sleep briefly without uniforms. Letters from this time reveal a mixture of relief and vulnerability. Men who had just survived shell fire now lay exposed, trusting that for a few hours they were safe enough to sleep unclothed. In World War II, similar patterns continued. British and American soldiers stationed in the Pacific often slept naked or in minimal clothing due to the tropical heat. In the jungles of Burma or the islands of the Philippines, it was a choice between suffocating in sweat-soaked uniforms or risking insect bites while unclothed. Some soldiers believed that sleeping without clothes helped prevent trench foot and skin infections, which were rampant in wet climates. In fact, military field manuals began to include hygiene recommendations that echoed ancient wisdom. Air out the body when you can, strip down when safe, let the skin heal. But it wasn't just about health. There was also a psychological side. Generals throughout history understood that how a soldier slept affected how he fought. Well-rested soldiers made better decisions, had steadier hands, and fewer breakdowns. That's why some commanders, like Alexander the Great, insisted that his men sleep well between battles, even if that meant stripping off armor and relaxing fully. There's a story perhaps apocryphal about Alexander ordering his soldiers to remove their garments at night while camping in the desert, believing that exposing the skin to the night sky would strengthen the spirit and remind them of their connection to the cosmos. Whether true or not, the symbolism matters. Naked sleep as a form of humility before fate. But beyond soldiers, consider the spies and assassins of history. In certain cultures, operatives were trained to sleep naked as a way of cultivating hyper-awareness. Without clothing, the smallest shift in air temperature, the faintest movement of fabric, could alert them to danger. Some ninja clans in feudal Japan practiced this method, believing that by reducing sensory barriers, they could maintain a subconscious connection to their surroundings, even during rest. In their world, sleep wasn't about letting go. It was about staying connected to the edges of wakefulness, ready to act in an instant. And then there's the idea of punishment and discipline in military camps. Throughout history, forcing soldiers or prisoners of war to sleep naked has been used as a method of control. In Roman camps, soldiers who broke rules were sometimes stripped and made to sleep exposed as a form of humiliation. Similar practices existed in ancient China, where deserters might be forced to lie naked before their commanders, symbolizing the stripping away of honor. In medieval Europe, military tribunals sometimes sentenced soldiers to naked watch, where the punished man had to stand guard without clothes, vulnerable to the elements, as a reminder of his failure. These practices blended punishment with ritual, reinforcing social hierarchies through the language of the body. But there's also the quieter side of wartime sleep, the moments when soldiers, away from battle, shared stories, huddled together for warmth, and found brief comfort in human connection. Letters from Civil War soldiers in America describe men lying side by side under shared blankets, sometimes unclothed, not for intimacy but for survival. These were the rare moments of peace amid chaos, where nakedness symbolized trust rather than shame. And let's not forget the women who served. In many wartime hospitals, nurses and medics developed sleep routines that included stripping down after long shifts to prevent disease transmission. During the Crimean War, Florence Nightingale and her team of nurses encouraged wounded soldiers to sleep without bandages or heavy garments whenever possible, believing that fresh air on wounds promoted healing. This was revolutionary at the time and led to changes in medical practices that lasted for decades. Even today, modern military guidelines often advise letting the body breathe after wearing heavy gear. Soldiers in Afghanistan and Iraq were told to remove body armor and air out their skin to prevent infections in hot climates. Some special forces units even train in sleep hygiene. Teaching recruits how they sleep, including what they wear, can impact recovery, muscle repair, and mental readiness. But beyond all this, there's a deeper human truth. Sleep is where the body lets down its guard, and that moment of vulnerability is universal, whether you're a king, a monk, a soldier, or a farmer. Sleeping naked in wartime might seem paradoxical. How can you let go of protection in the middle of danger? But history shows that sometimes the best way to survive is to allow the body to rest fully, even for a short while, because exhaustion kills more quietly than swords or bullets. And as strange as it sounds, there's something brave about letting yourself be bare to the world, even if just for a night. Tonight, as you listen to this, imagine the countless people across centuries who did the same, lying down after battle, after hardship, after fear, removing their garments, closing their eyes, and trusting the darkness to hold them until morning. In the next part of this story, we'll leave the battlefield and enter the world of medicine, exploring how doctors, healers, and midwives used naked sleep as part of their treatments, from ancient hospitals to early psychiatric wards. We'll also discover how the act of sleeping unclothed became part of health fads, experiments, and even quack cures in history. Stay with me. The night still has more secrets to reveal. If you thought the story of naked sleep couldn't get stranger, think again, because in this next chapter, we step into the dim, candlelit chambers of history's healers, doctors, and midwives, where sleeping without clothes wasn't just a habit or a comfort, but a prescription, a treatment, and sometimes a controversial experiment. For thousands of years, medical beliefs about sleep were tied to the body's natural cycles, and many healers believed that exposing the skin to the night air was essential for health. Let's begin in ancient Greece, where physicians like Hippocrates so-called father of medicine, wrote extensively about sleep. In his treatises, he warned against overwrapping the body at night, arguing that sweat trapped by clothes could cause bad humors to build up in the blood. Hippocrates taught that sleep should mimic death, peaceful, natural, and free of worldly attachments, including clothing. He believed that the skin was an organ of elimination, releasing toxins through pores during the night. Covering those pores, he said, caused the body to stew in its corruption. His solution? Sleep unclothed, in a cool environment whenever possible. But this advice wasn't just philosophical, it was part of early hospital care. In the healing temples of Asclepius, where patients sought cures through dream incubation, people often slept naked on stone beds after ritual bathing. Priests and physicians believed that divine messages about healing would come more clearly to a body stripped of its daily trappings. Fast forward to medieval Europe, and you find a different but equally curious set of medical practices. Physicians, in the Middle Ages, believed in balancing the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Too much heat was thought to cause fevers, while too much cold led to melancholy. Night was the time for the body to regulate itself, and many doctors recommended naked sleep as a way to cool the blood. This was especially true for women, who were believed to suffer from overheated wombs that could lead to hysteria, diagnosis for almost any female ailment at the time. Midwives often advised women to sleep naked or with open windows to let excess heat escape. They also encouraged pregnant women to sleep without clothes, believing that this would lead to healthier, calmer babies. Some even thought the baby in the womb could feel the difference between cloth and bare skin against the mother's belly, and that a naked, relaxed sleep would produce a child with a gentler temperament. But there were stranger practices still. In Renaissance Italy, a bizarre treatment called the sweating cure involved wrapping patients in hot blankets until they drenched their bodies in sweat, then stripping them naked and allowing them to cool naturally while sleeping. The idea was to purge the body of toxins through extreme temperature changes. Some patients were left naked in drafty rooms overnight, believing that the shock of cool air would close the pores at just the right moment, locking in health. This was risky. Of course, many caught pneumonia, but the practice persisted for centuries. In early psychiatric hospitals, naked sleep was sometimes forced upon patients as part of treatment. In the 18th and 19th centuries, asylums experimented with moral therapy, which included regulating sleep habits. Patients were sometimes required to sleep naked as a form of humility, to break their sense of pride or delusion. The theory was that madness came from too much ego, and stripping away clothes symbolized stripping away illusions. Some doctors claimed this practice calmed patients, though in reality, it was often just another form of control. In Victorian England, health reformers began to promote naked sleep as part of the natural hygiene movement. Writers like Dr. James Jackson advocated for fresh air, outdoor exercise, and unclothed sleep as ways to prevent tuberculosis, a disease that ravaged Europe in the 19th century. Jackson's books recommended that families sleep with windows open, in the nude if possible, believing that stale air and heavy bedclothes bred disease. Sanatoriums for tuberculosis patients adopted similar practices, encouraging patients to sleep outdoors in mountain air, covered only by thin blankets. Photographs from this era show rows of beds lined up on balconies and terraces, patients lying under the stars, sometimes with minimal clothing, their bodies exposed to the cold in the hope of curing the White Plague. But not all medical uses of naked sleep were about disease. Some were about beauty. In ancient Rome, cosmetic recipes often advised women to sleep naked to preserve the skin's freshness. The idea was that fabrics rubbed against the skin during the night, causing wrinkles and blemishes. Roman texts like Ovid's Medicamina Faciae Feminae mentioned skincare routines that ended with the instruction to sleep as nature intended. This belief persisted into the Renaissance, where noblewomen sometimes slept with their faces covered in honey or milk masks, lying naked on silk sheets to avoid disturbing their beauty treatments. In France's court of Versailles, it was fashionable for aristocrats to sleep without clothes beneath silk canopies, believing that this maintained the softness of their skin. Some even powdered their bodies before sleep, thinking it would prevent sweat and keep the skin youthful. And then there's the role of air baths, a medical fad that crossed into eccentric territory. Benjamin Franklin famously endorsed this practice, sitting naked by an open window each morning and evening, letting fresh air cool his skin. He believed this prevented colds and invigorated the mind. Franklin wrote letters describing his routine, noting how much better he slept after his air bath. Other intellectuals of the Enlightenment copied this method, combining it with cold water therapy and minimal clothing at night. The German physician Christoph Wilhelm Huffland, mentioned in an earlier chapter, also promoted these ideas, arguing that exposing the body to natural elements restored vitality. Some health resorts in 19th century Europe offered naked sleeping, rooms where patients could pay to sleep in open-air lodges without clothing, believing this would cure everything from arthritis to depression. Of course, not all these treatments worked, but the belief in the healing power of the bare body was widespread. In the 20th century, as psychology developed, naked sleep entered the realm of mental health. Psychoanalysts like Wilhelm Reich argued that the body's natural energies, what he called orgone energy, flowed more freely when people slept naked. Reich's ideas were controversial, but they influenced early body therapy and somatic psychology movements, which taught that how we hold our bodies during sleep affects our emotions and dreams. In sanatoriums and therapy retreats, patients were sometimes encouraged to sleep unclothed to release repression, connecting more honestly with their physical selves. And then there's the modern science of thermoregulation. Today, we know that body temperature drops slightly during sleep, helping trigger melatonin production and deep rest. Sleeping naked can assist this process, preventing overheating and allowing the body to maintain its natural rhythms. Studies show that people who sleep cool tend to experience more restorative sleep, with fewer awakenings during the night. Skin contact with cool air improves blood circulation, reduces cortisol, the stress hormone, and even supports metabolic health. But the idea that naked sleep is healthier isn't new. It's the continuation of beliefs that stretch back thousands of years, from the healing temples of ancient Greece to the mountain sanatoriums of the 19th century. Yet even with all this knowledge, the act of sleeping without clothes remains surrounded by cultural tension. For some, it's a private rebellion against social expectations. For others, it's a simple habit passed down from parents or grandparents. And for many, it's still linked to health, relaxation, and intimacy. As you lie here listening to this story, you're part of that long human tradition, one where the lines between medicine, ritual, and comfort blur in the quiet hours of the night. In the next part of this story, we'll explore how naked sleep intersects with art, literature, and storytelling itself. From ancient myths to modern novels, the image of the sleeping, unclothed body has been used to symbolize vulnerability, transformation, and sometimes danger. We'll uncover why so many artists and writers return to this image, and what it reveals about our relationship with the human body. Stay with me. The history of sleep has more strange chapters to come. If you've been wondering why the image of naked sleep appears so often in myths, paintings, and literature, the answer is simple but profound. There's something about the sleeping, unclothed body that captures humanity's deepest fears and desires. In this next part of the story, we'll explore how artists, poets, and storytellers throughout history have used naked sleep as a symbol, not just of rest, but of transformation, vulnerability, and even cosmic rebirth. Let's begin in the ancient world, where myths often involve gods or mortals asleep, exposed to fate. In Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, characters fall into deep, enchanted sleep, sometimes stripped of their armor or clothing, symbolizing surrender to forces beyond their control. Sleep, in these epics, isn't just about physical rest, it's a portal between worlds. The Greeks believed in Hypnos, the god of sleep, who lived in a cave where night and day met, surrounded by poppies and darkness. Artists depicted Hypnos as a gentle figure, often nude or draped in thin cloth, hovering over mortals to close their eyes with a soft touch. His brother Thanatos, the god of death, was also shown as a sleeping youth, symbolizing the thin line between sleep and death. In these stories, sleeping naked represented a return to purity, the shedding of life's burdens, and a step closer to the divine. The Romans continued this tradition. In countless mosaics and frescoes, Venus, the goddess of love, is shown sleeping unclothed, not in erotic poses, but in peaceful repose, symbolizing the vulnerability of love itself. Roman poets like Ovid wrote about lovers found asleep, bodies entwined without clothes, their secrets revealed in dreams. Sleep was the great equalizer, the time when kings and beggars alike lay exposed to the night. In medieval art, the image of the sleeping naked body often took on religious meanings. Adam and Eve, cast from Eden, were depicted covering themselves as they woke to shame. But in earlier Christian texts, there's also the idea of the sleep of innocence, when Adam slept unclothed in the garden before the fall. This moment represented perfect vulnerability before knowledge brought fear. Some mystics interpreted naked sleep as a metaphor for the soul's relationship with God, open, defenseless, and pure. In illuminated manuscripts, monks painted images of saints sleeping unclothed on the earth, symbolizing their humility and readiness to return to dust. The Renaissance brought new layers to this imagery. Painters like Giorgione, Titian, and Caravaggio depicted sleeping figures, gods, mortals, and mythic characters nude and vulnerable, often in natural settings. The famous painting, Sleeping Venus, by Giorgione, shows the goddess resting with soft, relaxed limbs, her eyes closed, a subtle smile on her face. Unlike earlier, rigid depictions of gods, this Venus is humanized, approachable, caught in a private moment. Her naked sleep isn't scandalous. It's sacred, a symbol of peace and the quiet mysteries of the night. Writers of the time echoed this theme. Shakespeare often used sleep as a metaphor for truth revealed. In plays like King Lear, characters are found asleep, stripped of their titles, exposed to storms and madness. In A Midsummer Night's Dream, enchanted sleep causes lovers to wake with new affections, suggesting that sleep, especially when taken vulnerably, can change destiny. Even in darker works, like the tragedies of Seneca or the poems of John Donne, sleep without clothing symbolizes both fragility and the shedding of worldly concerns. But let's not forget folktales, where naked sleep appears in unexpected places. In many European fairy tales, the hero or heroine falls asleep unclothed as part of a magical transformation. In the story of The 12 Swans, a princess knits shirts from nettles to save her cursed brothers, and during the final transformation scene, she sleeps naked on a church floor, vulnerable but determined, while her brothers return to human form. The symbolism is clear. The shedding of clothes is linked to change, sacrifice, and the passage between worlds. Similar themes appear in Indigenous storytelling. In Native American myths, vision quests often involve sleeping unclothed to receive guidance from spirits. The idea isn't about eroticism, it's about trust. To sleep exposed is to trust the earth, the ancestors, and the universe to hold you safely through the night. In Australian Aboriginal Dreamtime stories, ancestral beings lie sleeping in the landscape, their naked bodies becoming rivers, mountains, and stars. Sleep and creation are intertwined, and the bare body symbolizes the raw material of existence. In literature, naked sleep continues to symbolize transformation. In Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the creature observes humans sleeping, noting their vulnerability, their soft, breathing forms lying in beds, unaware of his gaze. The monsters. Loneliness is amplified by this scene. He is awake while others sleep, clothed or unclothed, safe in their ignorance. In Dostoevsky's novels, characters often experience revelations after waking from sleep, their inner worlds laid bare by dreams. Nakedness, whether literal or symbolic, becomes a pathway to truth. In Freud's interpretation of dreams, the recurring image of being naked in public is interpreted as a fear of exposure, of secret desires coming to light. Yet Freud also recognized that sleep itself is a return to the womb, a time when the body, unclothed and curled, reverts to its earliest state of being. This idea of regression, of stepping backward into safety, appears in countless modern works. In science fiction, characters enter cryogenic sleep chambers, often portrayed as naked or barely clothed, symbolizing a pause in life, a return to zero before waking into a new world. Think of films like 2001, A Space Odyssey, where suspended animation strips away identity, leaving only the human form in its most basic state. In horror stories, the moment of attack often comes when the victim is asleep, vulnerable sometimes, naked, emphasizing powerlessness and terror. Yet in other genres, the same image represents intimacy and trust, a character falling asleep unclothed beside a lover, showing complete surrender. A same pose can mean fear in one story and love in another. And then there's the use of sleep and nakedness in modern visual art. Photographers like Bill Brandt and Edward Weston captured images of sleeping bodies, highlighting the curves, the shadows, the quiet moments between wakefulness and dreaming. These works are not always sexual. They often focus on the simple fact of the human body at rest, unguarded, reminding us of our shared mortality. In installation art, pieces like Marina Abramovi's performances explore vulnerability by recreating the sensation of being watched while at rest, challenging audiences to confront their discomfort with the unprotected body. Even in contemporary poetry, the theme persists. Poets write about lying awake at night, skin against sheets, feeling the rawness of existence, the thin veil between consciousness and the abyss. Sleep becomes a metaphor for death, rebirth, and everything in between. Nakedness adds a layer of honesty to this state, a stripping away of pretense. But why does this image endure? Perhaps because it taps into something primal. Sleep is the one place where all humans are equal. We close our eyes, we let go of control, and in that moment, we are as we were born, fragile, soft, and unaware. To sleep naked is to amplify this vulnerability, to admit that we are animals beneath the clothes, the roles, the armor of daily life. It's no wonder that artists return to this image again, and again, it speaks to the core of human experience. Tonight, as you listen to this, think of the countless paintings, poems, and stories that have depicted this same moment. The quiet breath, the exposed skin, the trust that the world will hold you until morning. You are part of that story, part of that shared history. In the next part of this journey, we'll explore how the invention of the bed itself changed the way people thought about sleep and nakedness. From straw mats to royal canopies, the evolution of sleeping spaces reveals new layers of meaning about privacy, comfort, and exposure. Stay with me, the night still holds more secrets. If you've been picturing all these historical sleepers lying naked under the stars or wrapped in simple blankets, you might be wondering, When did people start using beds the way we think of them today? And how did the invention of the bed change the way people approach sleep, privacy, and nakedness? The truth is, the history of the bed is tightly connected to the history of the human body at rest. Beds didn't just offer comfort. They changed the social rules of how and where people slept, and they made the idea of sleeping naked either more private or, in some cases, more public. Let's go back to the beginning. For most of human history, beds were not personal furniture. Early humans slept on leaves, straw, or animal skins spread directly on the ground, usually in groups for warmth and safety. Archaeological evidence from caves in South Africa shows beds made of compacted grass and ash from burned plants, dating back 200,000 years. Sleeping in groups meant that nakedness was normal. No one thought much about it. Clothes, when available, were for daytime protection, not nighttime use. Fast forward to ancient Egypt, where the first recognizable beds began to appear, crafted from wood, sometimes with ropes woven across a frame. The wealthy used beds raised off the floor to avoid pests and snakes. Pharaohs had elaborately carved sleeping platforms, some with gold inlays and ivory details. But even in Egypt, people often slept naked, or nearly so, especially due to the heat. Nighttime was for cooling the body and cleansing the spirit, and the bed became a sacred space where rituals of purification took place. In tomb paintings, we see images of sleepers resting unclothed under thin linen sheets, watched over by protective gods. In Mesopotamia, beds were status symbols. Kings and nobles slept on high platforms, while servants and workers slept on mats or animal hides. The Epic of Gilgamesh describes beds as places of both sleep and ceremony, where dreams came, where gods spoke, and where bodies were laid out for burial. Nakedness in sleep was tied to these transitions between life, death, and the spiritual realm. But in most of the ancient world, beds were still communal. Families slept together, often in the same room, sometimes on the same mattress. In ancient Rome, large lectus beds served multiple purposes. They were for eating, resting, and sleeping. Wealthy Romans reclined on these beds at banquets, and at night, they removed their togas and tunics, often sleeping naked under wool, or linen covers. The idea of a private bedroom was rare. Instead, the house was a shared space, and the bed was part of social life. In medieval Europe, sleeping arrangements became even more complex. Most people, especially peasants, slept in communal spaces. The whole family might share a single straw mattress called a pallias, placed directly on the floor. Naked sleep was common here too, but not for luxury. It was practical. Clothes were expensive, and you didn't risk damaging them at night. People stripped down before climbing under coarse wool blankets, their skin pressed against one another. For warmth, the hearth fire might still be glowing, casting flickering shadows on bare shoulders and backs. But modesty wasn't the concern it is today. It was survival. Yet for the wealthy, the medieval period introduced a new kind of bed, the four-poster canopy bed. These enormous structures weren't just for sleeping, they were for displaying power. The curtains around the bed provided warmth and, more importantly, privacy. Before the invention of personal bedrooms, servants, guards, and attendants often shared the same living quarters as their lords. The curtains around the bed created the first semblance of a private space. Behind these heavy fabrics, nobles could undress, sleep naked, and conduct personal affairs without the eyes of the household watching. This shift changed the meaning of naked sleep. It became something hidden, a secret act, rather than a communal norm. By the Renaissance, beds had become even more elaborate. Italian and French aristocrats commissioned beds with embroidered silks, gold thread, and velvet canopies. The bedroom transformed from a multi-purpose space into a room dedicated to sleep and intimacy. Yet, In many noble houses, the act of going to bed was still semi-public. Courtiers watched as kings and queens were undressed by their attendants. The couture ceremony in France and England meant that even the royal act of sleep was part of social theater. Behind the curtains, however, many royals slept unclothed. Diaries from noble women in the 16th century describe removing layers of corsets, petticoats, and chemises before slipping naked under silk sheets. Physicians recommended this as a way to preserve beauty and health. The bed became a private stage for shedding the armor of public life. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the invention of the personal bedroom began to spread among the upper classes. Beds became softer, stuffed with feathers or down, and covered in fine linens. The Industrial Revolution made textiles cheaper, allowing more people to own pajamas and nightgowns, but even so, many preferred naked sleep. Philosophers like Rousseau and Franklin encouraged sleeping without clothes for health reasons, promoting air baths and skin exposure. But now, for the first time, people could close a door, draw curtains, and enjoy true privacy. This changed the relationship between nakedness and sleep. What was once communal became personal, even secretive. Beds were no longer just platforms for rest. They became symbols of intimacy, both with oneself and with others. The rise of the bourgeois home in the 19th century cemented this shift. Bedrooms became sanctuaries, separate from parlors and kitchens. Beds were private thrones, and the rituals of sleep became individualistic. Etiquette books instructed couples on how to behave in the bedroom, but behind closed doors, naked sleep continued, often as a quiet rebellion against societal stiffness. Yet in some parts of the world, communal sleep persisted. In Japan, for example, futons laid out on tatami mats allowed families to sleep together in shared rooms well into the 20th century. Nudity was normalized in this context, not seen as shameful, but as part of everyday life. In Scandinavian countries, the tradition of family beds also lasted longer, with multiple generations sleeping together for warmth in long winters. The bed wasn't just for rest, it was for bonding, storytelling, and survival. In the modern era, the bed has become a cultural icon. Think of all the images: lovers sharing a bed, a mother cradling a child, someone sick and dying, someone dreaming of far-off places. The bed is where we are born, where we sleep, where we make love, and where we die. And in all these moments, the naked body plays a role not always literal, but symbolic. To be in bed is to be vulnerable. Whether clothed or not, we let down our guard, close our eyes, and surrender to sleep. Advertising and media have seized on this symbolism. Mattress commercials show couples blissfully naked under white sheets, bathed in soft morning light. Films use bed scenes to reveal characters at their most human, crying, laughing, sleeping, dreaming. Even social media is filled with images of beds, carefully staged to suggest intimacy and rest. But beneath all this is the long history of the bed as a cultural object. It's not just furniture. It's a stage for life's quietest, most personal moments. And whether people sleep in a hammock in the Amazon, on a futon in Tokyo, or in a king-sized bed in New York, the act of lying, down naked to sleep, connects us all to a primal human experience. It reminds us that beneath the layers of clothing, beneath the masks we wear in public, we are still bodies that need rest, healing, and softness. Tonight, as you lie in your bed, whether you sleep clothed or not, you are part of this ancient story. Your mattress, your sheets, even the way you position your body carries echoes of history, of kings and peasants, of shared straw mats and golden canopies. In the next part of this story, we'll look at how modern technology, electricity, heating, air conditioning changed the way people sleep and whether they choose to sleep naked. We'll explore how the simple act of turning on a light or Adjusting the thermostat reshaped nighttime habits in ways most of us don't even notice. Stay with me. There's more to uncover in the history of the sleeping body. If you thought the invention of the bed transformed sleep, wait until you hear what came next, because the arrival of modern technology completely rewired the way humans approached nighttime, privacy, and the choice to sleep naked or clothed. Before the electric light, before central heating, before air conditioning and thermostats, the rhythm of human sleep was dictated entirely by nature. The sun set, the body cooled, and people instinctively prepared for sleep, often removing clothes to align with the drop in temperature. But with the invention of artificial light and the ability to control the climate of our homes, everything changed, including what we wore, or didn't wear, to bed. Let's start with the light bulb. Before Thomas Edison's breakthrough in the late 19th century, most people went to bed shortly after sunset, rising again at dawn. Candles and oil lamps were expensive and dangerous. Fire risk was constant. Night was associated with darkness, and darkness with sleep. But when electric lighting became common, people began to stay up later, shifting the natural boundaries of day and night. This also changed how they prepared for sleep. With longer evenings spent indoors, the transition from dressed to undressed became more private, often delayed until the very last moment before bed. And since electric light could expose the body in a way firelight ever did, brighter, harsher, more revealing, many people became more self-conscious about nighttime nudity. Curtains became thicker, blinds were invented, and new concerns about privacy emerged. Even so, many continued to sleep naked behind closed doors. In fact, some embraced the new technology as an excuse for comfort. Heated bedrooms meant no more. Shivering under cold sheets, making naked sleep easier even in winter. For the first time in history, the temperature of the sleeping space could be controlled, separating sleep from the environment outside. But this comfort came at a cost. Artificial heating, especially the steam radiators of the 19th and early 20th centuries, sometimes led to overheated bedrooms. Doctors began to warn against stifling air, recommending that sleepers keep windows cracked open and remove clothing at night to avoid headaches and insomnia. Medical journals from the 1920s and 30s include debates about the ideal sleeping temperature, with some experts advocating for naked sleep in cool rooms as the healthiest option. Others worried that this would lead to moral decay, arguing that pajamas and nightgowns preserve not just modesty but societal order. Meanwhile, air conditioning, invented in the early 20th century by Willis Carrier, revolutionized sleep for people in hot climates. Before air conditioning, sleeping naked was a necessity in tropical regions. In places like the American South, India, or Southeast Asia, people removed their clothes at night to survive the oppressive heat. Entire architectural styles like the wide verandas of southern plantation homes or the breezy courtyards of Indian Hevelis were designed to facilitate cooler sleep, often unclothed. But when air conditioning became widespread in the 1950s and 60s, people no longer had to rely on the breeze. Bedrooms could now be chilled to any desired temperature, and strangely, this led to more people wearing clothes to bed again, since the environment was controlled. Yet for many, the appeal of naked sleep remained. Surveys from the mid-20th century show a cultural divide. In hotter regions, naked sleep continued as tradition. In colder areas, technology gave people the luxury of choice. But something else changed too: advertising. The rise of consumer culture in the 20th century created new industries around sleep. Pajamas became big business. Companies like Sears, Roebuck & Co., and later brands like Victoria's Secret marketed nightwear not just for comfort, but for fashion. Advertisements showed glamorous couples in matching silk sleep sets, implying that stylish nightclothes were part of modern life. Hollywood reinforced this image. In classic films of the 1930s and 40s, stars like Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn wore elegant pajamas on screen. Censorship rules, the Hays Code, meant that fully naked sleep couldn't be shown in movies, so audiences were sold the idea that sophisticated people wore beautiful clothes to bed. But behind closed doors, reality was different. Diaries, letters, and private interviews from the era reveal that many people continued to sleep naked, just as they had for centuries. For some, it was about comfort. For others, it was about intimacy. The post-war boom of the 1950s brought suburban bedrooms with personal heating and air conditioning units, allowing couples to close the door, adjust the thermostat, and sleep however they pleased. In the 1960s and 70s, the sexual revolution further relaxed attitudes toward the body. The idea of sleeping naked became associated with freedom, rebellion, and natural living. Books like The Joy of Sex recommended naked sleep as part of a healthy relationship, promoting skin-to-skin contact for emotional bonding. But even as these ideas spread, cultural differences remained. In Japan, for example, communal baths continued to influence attitudes toward nudity, but traditional sleeping, arrangements like futons, kept people modest at night. In Scandinavian countries, sauna culture normalized nakedness, and many families slept unclothed as a practical matter, especially during the summer. In contrast, Victorian legacies in Britain and parts of the U.S. kept bedtime rituals more reserved, with layers of flannel and cotton pajamas protecting sleepers from imagined chills. Yet technology kept pushing the boundaries. The invention of electric blankets in the 1920s gave people another reason to undress before bed. Heated pads and blankets removed the fear of cold nights, encouraging people to shed layers. But they also sparked debates. Was it healthy to sleep warm? Or did the body need coolness for proper rest? Sleep scientists weighed in, suggesting that cooler sleep improved metabolism, lowered blood pressure, and helped regulate circadian rhythms. This led to new medical recommendations in the 1990s and 2000s. Keep the bedroom cool, minimize bedding, and for some, consider sleeping without clothes to help the body maintain natural temperature cycles. Meanwhile, the mattress industry exploded. Memory foam, cooling gels, and ergonomic designs flooded the market, all promising better sleep. Companies like Tempur-Pedic and Sleep Number began to advertise beds that responded to the body's pressure. Points, often showing couples lying naked under tasteful covers, suggesting that the ultimate sleep was natural and unencumbered. The rise of sleep tracking technology in the 2010s added another layer. Devices like Fitbits and smartwatches monitor heart rate, body temperature, and sleep cycles. Some studies indicated that naked sleep led to better temperature regulation, which in turn led to deeper sleep. Articles in health magazines touted the benefits of shedding pajamas: lower cortisol, better skin health, improved intimacy. Yet, despite all these advances, the cultural conversation remained complicated. Social media created new anxieties about body image, making some people more self-conscious about nakedness, even in private. At the same time, minimalist lifestyles and wellness movements encouraged a return to natural habits, including naked sleep. The slow living trend, focused on mindfulness and simplicity, embraced the idea of sleeping close to nature, free from synthetic fabrics and unnecessary layers. But there's also a darker side. The modern world has introduced new kinds of vulnerability. Surveillance technology, security cameras, and smart devices make privacy feel less secure. People wonder, if everything is being recorded, is any space truly private anymore? This has made some people reconsider nighttime habits, including what they wear or don't wear to bed. Even so, surveys in recent years suggest that about 1/3 of adults in the US and Europe regularly sleep naked, citing comfort, health, and intimacy as the main reasons. For couples, skin-to-skin contact during sleep is shown to release oxytocin, the bonding hormone, reducing stress and promoting emotional closeness. And for individuals, sleeping naked often leads to better sleep quality and a stronger sense of personal freedom. So where does that leave us? The history of naked sleep is now at a crossroads between tradition, technology, and personal choice. We have more control over our sleeping environments than ever before: temperature, light, noise, bedding materials, but the core human need remains the same. We all want to rest, to heal, to dream. And whether we do that wrapped in blankets, dressed in silk pajamas, or with nothing between our skin and the air, the act of sleep connects us to a long, ancient lineage of human experience. Tonight, as you adjust your thermostat, set your alarm, and slip under your sheets, you're participating in that same story. The difference is that now, you have the power to shape your sleep environment in ways your ancestors never imagined. But at the heart of it all, the body remains what it has always been: soft, fragile, and in need of rest. In the next part of this journey, we'll explore the psychology of sleep and nakedness, why the human mind associates unclothed sleep with vulnerability, comfort, eroticism, and sometimes fear. We'll look at the science of body image, shame, and freedom, and why the simple act of taking off clothes before bed can mean so many different things to different people. Stay with me. The night still has more to reveal. If you've followed this story so far, you've heard about the historical, medical, and cultural reasons people have slept naked for thousands of years. But what about the mind? Why does the human brain react so strongly to the idea of sleeping without clothes? In this next part of the journey, we'll explore the psychology of naked sleep, why it brings comfort to some, anxiety to others, and how it intersects with body image, vulnerability, freedom, and control. Let's begin with one of the most basic facts about the human mind. We are hardwired to notice when bodies are exposed. This reaction is part survival instinct, part social training. For ancient humans, the sight of a naked body signaled safety in communal sleeping groups, but it could also signal danger in unfamiliar situations. In evolutionary terms, a sleeping naked body is at its most vulnerable state: unarmed, unarmored, defenseless. That's why the brain evolved to pay attention to this image, whether consciously or unconsciously. Even today, people experience heightened emotional responses to nudity, especially in moments of vulnerability like sleep. But this reaction is complicated by culture. In societies where nudity is normalized, like communal saunas in Finland or hot springs in Japan, people may feel less self-conscious about sleeping unclothed. In contrast, cultures with strict modesty codes often associate nakedness with shame, privacy, or transgression. This creates a psychological tension. The act of sleeping without clothes can trigger both comfort and discomfort, depending on personal and cultural conditioning. Let's look at comfort first. Psychologists studying sleep habits have found that sleeping naked can reduce anxiety in some people. Skin-to-skin contact, even with oneself, triggers the release of oxytocin, the cuddle hormone. Oxytocin lowers cortisol levels, reducing stress and promoting feelings of safety. For couples, sleeping naked together enhances bonding and intimacy. For individuals, it can create a sense of being at ease with one's own body, fostering self-acceptance. But for others, the idea of sleeping naked causes stress, not relief. Why? It comes down to body image. In modern society, especially with the rise of social media and constant visual comparison, many people develop a distorted view of their bodies. Negative body image can make nakedness feel like exposure, even in private. Some people avoid unclothed sleep because they're uncomfortable with their reflection or the thought of someone seeing them unguarded. This isn't just about weight or appearance. It's about shame, a powerful emotion tied to social acceptance and fear of judgment. Researchers in psychology call this self-objectification, where a person constantly views themselves from the outside, as if watching through the eyes of others. This mental habit can turn even private moments, like bedtime, into stages of silent critique. For people trapped in this mindset, the simple act of removing clothes before sleep feels risky, like stepping onto a psychological tightrope. Yet, for others, naked sleep is an act of rebellion against these pressures. It's a way of saying, my body belongs to me, not to society's expectations. This is why some therapists recommend sleeping without clothes as part of body neutrality. Exercises. Unlike body positivity, which can feel forced, body neutrality encourages people to accept their bodies as they are functional, alive, capable of rest without focusing on appearance. Lying naked in bed, feeling the softness of sheets against skin, noticing the rhythm of breath, can ground a person in their own physicality, reducing anxiety over looks. But there's another layer: control. Sleep is a time when we surrender control. We close our eyes, let our guard down, and enter a state of vulnerability. For some, adding nakedness to this equation feels like double exposure. It's not just the unconscious mind that's at risk, it's the physical body too. What if there's a fire, an intruder, a medical emergency? These fears, while often irrational, still shape people's decisions about nighttime habits. Some people report sleeping in clothes just in case, even if they find it less comfortable, because it gives them a sense of readiness for the unexpected. Others, however, embrace naked sleep as a form of trust, not just in their immediate safety, but in life itself. To lie down unclothed and fall asleep is to say, I am safe enough to let go. This act can be therapeutic, especially for people recovering from trauma or chronic anxiety. Sleep researchers have documented how rituals around bedtime, such as removing clothes, dimming lights, or breathing deeply, signal to the brain that it's time to shift from vigilance to rest. For some, this ritual is most effective when combined with the sensation of bare skin against cool sheets, a tactile cue that it's time to stop worrying. But cultural messaging complicates things. In media, naked sleep is often portrayed in extremes, either as erotic in romance scenes or as dangerous in horror films where victims are caught vulnerable. Will people be nudged to wear sleepwear embedded with health trackers, giving up the ancient practice of sleeping unclothed in exchange for more data? Or will there be a parallel movement, a return to unplugged sleep, where people reject the devices, draw the curtains, turn off the trackers, and lie naked under blankets as their ancestors did, free from beeps, graphs, and reports? Already, some people are choosing this path. The rise of digital detox retreats often includes tech-free sleep, where guests hand over their phones, refuse trackers, and sleep in natural environments, sometimes naked, sometimes not, but always away from screens. There's a growing awareness that not everything needs to be optimized. Sometimes the best rest comes from letting go. And yet, the temptation of technology remains. Imagine a future where your bed not only tracks your sleep, but also orders new sheets when yours wear out, schedules medical appointments if it detects irregular heartbeats, and syncs with your employer's wellness program to report on your sleep quality. In such a world, what happens to privacy? What happens to choice? Naked sleep, once a symbol of natural rest, might become a small act of resistance, a way of keeping part of the night untouched by algorithms. Or perhaps technology will adapt, finding new ways to measure the body without fabric as an intermediary, blurring the lines between nature and machine even further. Tonight, as you lie in your bed, whether you sleep with sensors or in silence, whether you choose to wear clothes or not, you're part of this unfolding story. You're standing at the crossroads of ancient ritual and futuristic possibility. The act of sleep, once so simple, is now a terrain of choice, technology, and meaning. In the next part of this story, we'll return to a more personal level. We'll explore bedtime rituals from around the world, how different cultures prepare for sleep, how they treat the body at night, and why the ways we transition from day to night reveal so much about who we are. Stay with me, the night has more stories to tell. If you're still with me on this journey, you're probably beginning to see that sleep isn't just about biology. It's about ritual, memory, and culture. The way people prepare for sleep, whether they wear clothes or not, whether they light candles or check smartphones, says more about a civilization than almost any other daily habit. In this part of the story, let's shift from technology to tradition. We'll explore bedtime rituals from around the world, small, often unnoticed moments that reveal how people mark the transition from day to night, and how naked sleep fits into those practices. Because for many cultures, sleep is not just a pause in consciousness, it's a sacred threshold between life's demands and the dream world. Let's begin in India, where ancient Ayurvedic medicine describes bedtime routines that are still followed today. The practice of dinacharya includes a sequence of actions before sleep: washing the feet, applying oil to the body, meditating, and breathing deeply to prepare the nervous system for rest. Many Ayurvedic texts recommend sleeping with minimal or no clothing to allow the skin to absorb the benefits of the oil and to release the heat accumulated during the day. Coconut oil, sesame oil, and ghee are traditionally massaged into the skin, believed to balance the dashas vata, pitta, and kapha, which govern the body's energy. Sleeping naked, in this context, isn't about comfort or rebellion. It's about aligning the body with natural cycles, respecting the skin as a boundary between the internal world and the cosmos. Now let's move to Scandinavia, where the concept of hag in Denmark or miss in Sweden governs nighttime rituals. These words describe cozy, simple pleasures: lighting candles, drinking herbal tea, soft blankets, and quiet moments before bed. In Nordic countries, where winter nights are long and dark, sleep is treated as a cherished escape from the cold. It's common for people to sleep naked under heavy down comforters, regardless of the weather outside. The tradition of sauna before bed also plays a role here. Families or individuals sweat out the day's tensions in a hot sauna, then rinse off in cold water before slipping under blankets with nothing between the skin and the warmth. This practice isn't just about relaxation. It's about respecting the body's rhythms, embracing vulnerability, and shedding stress physically and emotionally. In Japan, the bedtime ritual is different, but equally meaningful. After bathing, in a hot ofuro, a deep soaking tub filled with near scalding water, people often wear loose robes called yukata or sleep in simple, light garments. But in summer, especially in older generations, it's not uncommon to sleep naked on tatami mats with only a thin sheet called a cake butin to cover the body. The concept of hadaka no sukiai, or naked communion, often associated with communal baths, extends into the private realm of sleep. It's a way of returning to the simplest form of being human, stripped of social roles and expectations. This is especially true in rural areas, where shared family sleeping spaces have persisted for generations. In parts of Africa, bedtime routines are communal and connected to the environment. In certain villages, people gather around fires, share stories, and prepare for rest together. Sleep happens outdoors or in open-air huts, and clothing is often minimal or absent. The hot climate makes it practical, but the act of sleeping unclothed is also tied to cultural acceptance of the body as natural and unashamed. In many African societies, nudity is not automatically sexualized, it's contextual. A person bathing, sleeping, or nursing a child is not viewed through the same lens as someone dressing for a ceremony or event. The nighttime is a time for returning to the basics of life: breath, skin, sleep. In Latin America, particularly in coastal regions of Brazil, Colombia, and Mexico, siesta culture influences nighttime sleep. People often nap during the hottest parts of the day and stay up later into the night. When sleep finally comes, it's often after long communal evenings of food and conversation. In humid climates, sleeping naked or in minimal clothing is common. Hammocks are used in many places, allowing the body to sway gently, exposed to the breeze, connecting with a rhythm older than mattresses or beds. In the Middle East, traditional bedtime routines involve cleansing rituals. The practice of wudu in Islam includes washing hands, face, and feet before prayer and rest. In some Sufi traditions, sleep is seen as a spiritual practice and opportunity for the soul to ascend, to meet angels, or to receive visions. Clothing at night varies depending on culture and climate, but in desert regions, the cool air makes minimal clothing preferable. People sleep on rooftops, under the stars, with only the sky as their covering, reconnecting with the vastness of the universe. And then there's the idea of segmented sleep, which was common in medieval Europe. Before industrialization, people often slept in two phases: first sleep and second sleep. After the first few hours, they would wake, pray, write letters, or talk quietly in bed before falling back asleep. In this context, sleep was not a single block of unconsciousness, but a ritual woven into nightly life. Historical records suggest that during these hours of wakefulness, people often lay naked under their covers, enjoying the warmth of the hearth and the silence of the world outside. Bedtime was not rushed. It was a ceremony. In indigenous cultures of the Americas, sleep often happened in communal settings, with no separation between generations. The idea of private bedrooms was foreign. Children, parents, and elders slept together in longhouses or communal huts, creating a sense of safety and shared experience. Clothing at night was dictated by temperature, not social rules. Some tribes believed that sleeping close to the earth, unclothed, allowed the body to absorb energy from the land, a practice echoed today in grounding or earthing movements, where people sleep outdoors or on natural surfaces to reduce stress and inflammation. In Jewish traditions, bedtime includes the Shema prayer, whispered before sleep as a way to surrender the soul to God for the night. Some Kabbalistic texts describe sleep as 1/60th of death, a time when the soul leaves the body and ascends to higher realms. In these moments, clothing is secondary to intention. The act of going to bed, whether naked or clothed, becomes a spiritual transition, a miniature rehearsal for mortality, and a reminder of human fragility. In Christianity, monastic communities like the Benedictines developed strict rules for sleep. Monks and nuns wore simple night garments, but some ascetic orders chose to sleep naked as a form of humility, lying on hard wooden boards to remind themselves of death and the temporary nature of the body. This practice was not about comfort, but discipline, shedding the trappings of the day and exposing the self to God. In contemporary Western life, bedtime rituals vary widely. Some people meditate, others scroll through their phones. Some wear elaborate pajamas, others sleep naked under soft blankets. Sleep hygiene, a modern term for healthy sleep habits, encourages consistency. Dim the lights, avoid caffeine, create a calm environment. But beneath these guidelines lies a deeper human need to mark the end of the day, to acknowledge the body's need for rest, and to cross the threshold from waking to dreaming. Will people be nudged to wear sleepwear embedded with health trackers, giving up the ancient practice of sleeping unclothed in exchange for more data? Or will there be a parallel movement, a return to unplugged sleep, where people reject the devices, draw the curtains, Turn off the trackers and lie naked under blankets as their ancestors did, free from beeps, graphs, and reports? Already, some people are choosing this path. The rise of digital detox retreats often includes tech-free sleep, where guests hand over their phones, refuse trackers, and sleep in natural environments, sometimes naked, sometimes not, but always away from screens. There's a growing awareness that not everything needs to be optimized. Sometimes the best rest comes from letting go. And yet, the temptation of technology remains. Imagine a future where your bed not only tracks your sleep, but also orders new sheets when yours wear out, schedules medical appointments if it detects irregular heartbeats, and syncs with your employer's wellness program to report on your sleep quality. In such a world, what happens to privacy? What happens to choice? Naked sleep, once a symbol of natural rest, might become a small act of resistance, a way of keeping part of the night untouched by algorithms. Or perhaps technology will adapt, finding new ways to measure the body without fabric as an intermediary, blurring the lines between nature and machine even further. Tonight, as you lie in your bed, whether you sleep with sensors or in silence, whether you choose to wear clothes or not, you're part of this unfolding story. You're standing at the crossroads of ancient ritual and futuristic possibility. The act of sleep, once so simple, is now a terrain of choice, technology, and meaning. In the next part of this story, we'll return to a more personal level. We'll explore bedtime rituals from around the world, how different cultures prepare for sleep, how they treat the body at night, and why the ways we transition from day to night reveal so much about who we are. Stay with me, the night has more stories to tell. If you're still with me on this journey, you're probably beginning to see that sleep isn't just about biology. It's about ritual, memory, and culture. The way people prepare for sleep, whether they wear clothes or not, whether they light candles or check smartphones, says more about a civilization than almost any other daily habit. In this part of the story, let's shift from technology to tradition. We'll explore bedtime rituals from around the world, small, often unnoticed moments that reveal how people mark the transition from day to night, and how naked sleep fits into those practices. Because for many cultures, sleep is not just a pause in consciousness, it's a sacred threshold between life's demands and the dream world. Let's begin in India, where ancient Ayurvedic medicine describes bedtime routines that are still followed today. The practice of dinacharya includes a sequence of actions before sleep: washing the feet, applying oil to the body, meditating, and breathing deeply to prepare the nervous system for rest. Many Ayurvedic texts recommend sleeping with minimal or no clothing to allow the skin to absorb the benefits of the oil and to release the heat accumulated during the day. Coconut oil, sesame oil, and ghee are traditionally massaged into the skin, believed to balance the dashas vata, pitta, and kapha, which govern the body's energy. Sleeping naked, in this context, isn't about comfort or rebellion. It's about aligning the body with natural cycles, respecting the skin as a boundary between the internal world and the cosmos. Now let's move to Scandinavia, where the concept of hag in Denmark or miss in Sweden governs nighttime rituals. These words describe cozy, simple pleasures: lighting candles, drinking herbal tea, soft blankets, and quiet moments before bed. In Nordic countries, where winter nights are long and dark, sleep is treated as a cherished escape from the cold. It's common for people to sleep naked under heavy down comforters, regardless of the weather outside. The tradition of sauna before bed also plays a role here. Families or individuals sweat out the day's tensions in a hot sauna, then rinse off in cold water before slipping under blankets with nothing between the skin and the warmth. This practice isn't just about relaxation. It's about respecting the body's rhythms, embracing vulnerability, and shedding stress physically and emotionally. In Japan, the bedtime ritual is different, but equally meaningful. After bathing, in a hot ofuro, a deep soaking tub filled with near scalding water, people often wear loose robes called yukata or sleep in simple, light garments. But in summer, especially in older generations, it's not uncommon to sleep naked on tatami mats with only a thin sheet called a cake butin to cover the body. The concept of hadaka no sukiai, or naked communion, often associated with communal baths, extends into the private realm of sleep. It's a way of returning to the simplest form of being human, stripped of social roles and expectations. This is especially true in rural areas, where shared family sleeping spaces have persisted for generations. In parts of Africa, bedtime routines are communal and connected to the environment. In certain villages, people gather around fires, share stories, and prepare for rest together. Sleep happens outdoors or in open-air huts, and clothing is often minimal or absent. The hot climate makes it practical, but the act of sleeping unclothed is also tied to cultural acceptance of the body as natural and unashamed. In many African societies, nudity is not automatically sexualized, it's contextual. A person bathing, sleeping, or nursing a child is not viewed through the same lens as someone dressing for a ceremony or event. The nighttime is a time for returning to the basics of life: breath, skin, sleep. In Latin America, particularly in coastal regions of Brazil, Colombia, and Mexico, siesta culture influences nighttime sleep. People often nap during the hottest parts of the day and stay up later into the night. When sleep finally comes, it's often after long communal evenings of food and conversation. In humid climates, sleeping naked or in minimal clothing is common. Hammocks are used in many places, allowing the body to sway gently, exposed to the breeze, connecting with a rhythm older than mattresses or beds. In the Middle East, traditional bedtime routines involve cleansing rituals. The practice of wudu in Islam includes washing hands, face, and feet before prayer and rest. In some Sufi traditions, sleep is seen as a spiritual practice and opportunity for the soul to ascend, to meet angels, or to receive visions. Clothing at night varies depending on culture and climate, but in desert regions, the cool air makes minimal clothing preferable. People sleep on rooftops, under the stars, with only the sky as their covering, reconnecting with the vastness of the universe. And then there's the idea of segmented sleep, which was common in medieval Europe. Before industrialization, people often slept in two phases: first sleep and second sleep. After the first few hours, they would wake, pray, write letters, or talk quietly in bed before falling back asleep. In this context, sleep was not a single block of unconsciousness, but a ritual woven into nightly life. Historical records suggest that during these hours of wakefulness, people often lay naked under their covers, enjoying the warmth of the hearth and the silence of the world outside. Bedtime was not rushed. It was a ceremony. In indigenous cultures of the Americas, sleep often happened in communal settings, with no separation between generations. The idea of private bedrooms was foreign. Children, parents, and elders slept together in longhouses or communal huts, creating a sense of safety and shared experience. Clothing at night was dictated by temperature, not social rules. Some tribes believed that sleeping close to the earth, unclothed, allowed the body to absorb energy from the land, a practice echoed today in grounding or earthing movements, where people sleep outdoors or on natural surfaces to reduce stress and inflammation. In Jewish traditions, bedtime includes the Shema prayer, whispered before sleep as a way to surrender the soul to God for the night. Some Kabbalistic texts describe sleep as 1/60th of death, a time when the soul leaves the body and ascends to higher realms. In these moments, clothing is secondary to intention. The act of going to bed, whether naked or clothed, becomes a spiritual transition, a miniature rehearsal for mortality, and a reminder of human fragility. In Christianity, monastic communities like the Benedictines developed strict rules for sleep. Monks and nuns wore simple night garments, but some ascetic orders chose to sleep naked as a form of humility, lying on hard wooden boards to remind themselves of death and the temporary nature of the body. This practice was not about comfort, but discipline, shedding the trappings of the day and exposing the self to God. In contemporary Western life, bedtime rituals vary widely. Some people meditate, others scroll through their phones. Some wear elaborate pajamas, others sleep naked under soft blankets. Sleep hygiene, a modern term for healthy sleep habits, encourages consistency. Dim the lights, avoid caffeine, create a calm environment. But beneath these guidelines lies a deeper human need to mark the end of the day, to acknowledge the body's need for rest, and to cross the threshold from waking to dreaming. And in this ritual, the decision to wear clothes or not is deeply personal, often unconscious, yet rooted in history. For some, naked sleep is about comfort. For others, it's about connecting to ancestral ways of living. For some, it's a private rebellion against the constraints of modern life. For others, it's simply practical, a way to stay cool, to feel free, to sleep more deeply. Tonight, as you prepare for your rest, think about the rituals you follow. Do you brush your teeth, check your phone, whisper a prayer, or adjust the thermostat? Do you wear special clothes, or none at all? Each choice carries echoes of the past, of countless generations who prepared for sleep with their versions of these moments. In the next part of this story, we'll explore sleep and nakedness in survival situations, how people cope with sleep in extreme environments, from shipwrecks to mountain shelters, from nomadic tents to space stations. We'll uncover how the human body responds to sleep when the usual comforts of home disappear, and why naked sleep sometimes persists even in the harshest conditions. Stay with me, the night still holds more to discover. If you've ever wondered what happens to sleep, when survival is at stake, when the world falls apart, when the usual comforts of home disappear, the answers are stranger than you might think. Because even in shipwrecks, mountain shelters, deserts, and space stations, the human body still needs to rest, and sometimes, even in the harshest conditions, people choose or are forced to sleep naked. In this part of the story, we'll explore how sleep happens when the ordinary rules break down, and how the act of shedding clothes, even in dangerous situations, can still be part of human survival. Let's begin with the cold. It seems logical that in freezing environments, people would layer up for sleep, but history shows that in some cases, the opposite happens. Mountaineers, Arctic explorers, and soldiers in extreme cold have sometimes chosen to sleep partially or fully unclothed inside sleeping bags or fur-lined shelters. Why? Because when you sleep in layers of damp or sweaty clothing, the moisture cools and freezes, drawing heat away from the skin. In contrast, removing wet clothes before sleep allows the body to warm up faster when wrapped in dry insulation. Accounts from polar expeditions, like Ernest Shackleton's famous journey in the Antarctic, describe men stripping naked inside reindeer skin sleeping bags, despite the sub-zero temperatures outside. They did this not for comfort, but to avoid hypothermia caused by wet fabric. Once inside the warm cocoon of fur or down, the naked body could regulate its heat better than if wrapped in frozen garments. The act of undressing in these moments became a survival tactic, a strange but practical ritual learned through bitter experience. In desert environments, the pattern is different, but equally curious. Nomadic tribes, like the Tuareg or Bedouin, often sleep under the open sky, wearing minimal clothing or none at all during the hottest nights. The desert, after sunset, becomes cold quickly. But during certain seasons, the heat lingers, making fabric feel suffocating. The human body cools more efficiently through evaporation when skin is exposed to moving air. For thousands of years, people in these climates have understood this instinctively, choosing to sleep close to the earth, with only a thin cloth beneath them, or sometimes directly on the sand. This practice isn't about modesty or immodesty. It's about harmony with the environment, adapting to what the body needs to survive. But what about emergencies? In shipwrecks, plane crashes, or sudden disasters, people often lose access to their belongings, including clothes. Survival accounts from lifeboats in World War II or marooned sailors centuries earlier often mention the strange reality of nakedness in survival. Clothes rot, get torn away by waves, or are removed to treat wounds or prevent infections. Sailors on long, drifting lifeboat journeys, like the crew of the Essex, the ship that inspired Moby Dick, recorded how they stripped off what remained of their garments as fabric disintegrated in salt water. They baked naked under the sun, shivering at night, but found that keeping wet, crusted clothes on made things worse. In these moments, nakedness was not about choice, but necessity, and sleep, when it came, happened in that raw, exposed state. Even in modern survival stories, like those of mountaineers trapped in storms, you'll find similar patterns. Climbers in the Himalayas sometimes share body heat in tents, sleeping skin to skin to prevent hypothermia. This practice is known as human bivouac and is taught in survival training around the world. Military manuals advise soldiers in cold environments to remove wet clothes before huddling together under emergency blankets, regardless of social discomfort. In these situations, the body becomes both the problem and the solution, and sleep, even brief moments of unconsciousness, becomes critical to survival. Then there's space, the final frontier, where humans face entirely new challenges in sleep. Astronauts aboard the International Space Station follow strict sleep schedules, but their bodies drift weightless, with no up or down. They sleep in small cabins or zippered sleeping bags attached to walls to prevent floating. Clothes in space serve multiple functions: protection from temperature changes, prevention of skin abrasions in zero gravity, and management of hygiene since showers are impossible. Yet astronauts often wear as little as possible during sleep to avoid overheating, because in microgravity, heat doesn't rise away from the body. NASA provides soft, breathable garments, but some crew members prefer to sleep in just underwear or minimal clothing to keep cool. The constraints of space make complete nakedness unlikely. Privacy is limited, and the station is shared, but the instinct to reduce barriers between skin and air remains. In survival shelters on Earth, similar instincts apply. In bushcraft and wilderness survival, experts teach that removing damp clothes before sleep, even in cold weather, reduces the risk of hypothermia if you have a proper shelter and dry covering. The body, when well insulated but unclothed, can warm itself more efficiently than if trapped in cold, sweat-soaked fabric. Survivalists often carry emergency bivy sacks, reflective, heat-trapping cocoons that work best with direct skin contact. Sleeping naked inside them, though counterintuitive, conserves heat better in some situations. And then there's the psychological side of survival sleep. In extreme situations, the human mind reverts to primal modes of functioning. Social norms fade. Modesty becomes irrelevant. The body's basic needs: warmth, rest, protection take over. Anthropologists studying disaster scenarios note that people quickly adapt to new realities. In refugee camps, after hurricanes, in makeshift shelters, people sleep however they can, sometimes without clothes, sometimes sharing blankets with strangers. In these moments, nakedness loses its cultural charge. It becomes part of survival, no more remarkable than hunger or thirst. But there's another layer to this: the role of trust. Sleeping naked, especially in a survival context, requires a level of trust in the immediate environment or in the people nearby. In team survival scenarios, like soldiers trapped behind enemy lines or explorers in isolated regions sharing body heat without clothing, builds a kind of intimacy not easily replicated in normal life. It's not about sexuality. It's about mutual dependence, a physical affirmation of the shared human condition. You see this in historical accounts of trench warfare during World War I, where soldiers sometimes stripped off lice-infested uniforms and lay together under coats or tarps, skin to skin, because it was the only way to sleep without freezing. And you see it in mountain rescue stories, where survivors share one sleeping bag, removing outer garments to conserve heat together, creating a temporary pact of survival. Even animals do this. Wolves, primates, and other mammals huddle for warmth, their fur and skin pressed together in sleep, instinctively understanding that survival is easier when shared. For humans, this behavior persists beneath the layers of culture, waiting for the right or wrong moment to re-emerge. There are also spiritual interpretations of this pattern. Some survivalists talk about returning to the earth, a moment. In extreme hardship, when you strip away everything unnecessary and reconnect with the rawness of life. Lying naked in a cave, under a tarp, or in a lifeboat is not just about physical comfort. It's about accepting the body's place in nature, surrendering to the elements while trusting in resilience. Some people find this liberating. Others find it terrifying. But it's a common thread across survival narratives. And let's not forget about sleep deprivation, another survival issue. In emergencies, sleep is often fragmented or scarce. The body adapts by taking microsleeps, brief moments of unconsciousness that can happen even while sitting upright. In situations where clothing is lost or removed, the body's sense of boundary changes. Nakedness can blur the line between waking and sleeping, heightening awareness of breath, heartbeat, and vulnerability. Some describe this as entering a trance-like state, where the mind hovers between exhaustion and alertness, the skin hyper-aware of temperature shifts and the sounds of the environment. In ancient times, shamans and vision seekers sometimes used naked sleep in caves or wilderness as part of initiation rituals, blending survival with spiritual testing. Today, in survival scenarios, people often find themselves unintentionally reenacting these primal rites, stripped of modern life, reduced to breath, skin, and the hope of another morning. Tonight, as you lie in your bed, think of those moments. In human history on ice floes, in deserts, in lifeboats, when sleep came without comfort, when nakedness wasn't a choice, but a condition of staying alive. Think of the thin line between survival and rest, between exhaustion and surrender. In the next part of this story, we'll explore the role of naked sleep in love, sex, and human connection, not just in modern relationships, but in the rituals of courtship, marriage, and intimacy across history. We'll look at how the sleeping body, bare and exposed, becomes a symbol of trust, desire, and sometimes power. Stay with me. The night still has more secrets to share. If you've ever wondered why so many stories, paintings, poems, and rituals involve lovers asleep together, skin to skin, no barriers between them, it's because naked sleep has always been tied to intimacy. But it's not just about sex. It's about trust, surrender, and the shared vulnerability of bodies at rest. In this part of the story, we'll explore how naked sleep weaves through the history of love, courtship, marriage, and power. We'll look at how different cultures saw the sleeping, unclothed body not just as a symbol of passion, but as a mirror of human connection, sometimes gentle, sometimes cruel, always revealing. Let's begin in ancient times, where marriage rites often included public or semi-public moments of nakedness at night. In medieval Europe, the bedding ceremony was a common wedding ritual. especially among nobles. After the wedding feast, friends and family escorted the newlyweds to bed, sometimes stripping them down before tucking them under the covers, while witnesses lingered to ensure the marriage was consummated or at least initiated. Diaries from the period describe how the couple was expected to lie naked side by side, even if exhausted, frightened, or unsure of what to do next. For the couple, this moment was often less about eroticism and more about a terrifying exposure, a surrender to tradition and expectation. But in private, when the curtains closed and the guests left, the naked body at rest became a different kind of symbol, the raw, human foundation of marriage itself. This practice wasn't limited to Europe. In parts of ancient China, marriage contracts sometimes specified the first night's sleep arrangements. Newlyweds were advised to sleep unclothed together, not necessarily to consummate the marriage immediately, but to align their ki, the life force energy believed to flow through the body. Traditional Chinese medicine taught that skin-to-skin contact harmonized yin and yang, balancing masculine and feminine forces through warmth, breath, and proximity. Even if no words were spoken, the act of lying unclothed together was seen as the beginning of marital unity, a quiet exchange of vulnerability beneath silk quilts or bamboo mats. In Polynesian cultures, love and sleep were often intertwined. Oral histories from Hawaii, Tahiti, and Samoa describe the practice of sleeping together as part of courtship. In some cases, young lovers would secretly meet at night, slipping into each other's huts, lying naked together, not always for sex, but to share warmth, whispers, and dreams. These meetings were sometimes sanctioned by the community, sometimes forbidden, but always carried layers of meaning. Naked sleep wasn't just physical, it was emotional, a way of building trust in the quiet hours when no one else watched. In Norse sagas, lovers are often described lying together on furs by the fire, their weapons set aside, their clothes shed not just for pleasure, but for peace. Viking households shared sleeping spaces, but lovers often had designated places within the longhouse to share private rest. This act of sleeping unclothed was part of the social contract between partners, a way of affirming partnership in a world filled with violence and uncertainty. Love was tested not just in battle, but in sleep. Could you trust the person beside you when your eyes were closed? Could you be defenseless together? In the Kama Sutra of ancient India, naked sleep is mentioned not as a prelude to sex, but as an important part of romantic bonding. The text advises couples to sleep in each other's arms after intimacy, unclothed, to maintain connection and harmony. This was considered essential for long-term relationships, not just for pleasure, but for emotional health. The idea was that shared sleep, without barriers, allowed the couple's energies to blend, their breathing to synchronize, their hearts to beat together through the night. In the Ottoman Empire, royal harems included rituals of sleep that mixed love, politics, and power. A sultan might choose a concubine for the night, and after intimacy, they would often sleep naked together, not just as lovers, but as participants in a delicate game of favor and trust. In some cases, the chosen woman would be promoted based on how she behaved not during sex, but during sleep. Did she snore? Did she sleep restfully or fitfully? These details were whispered about in palace gossip, affecting a woman's future in the harem's hierarchy. Sleep, naked and vulnerable, was part of court politics. In Japan's Edo period, pillow books like Sei Shonagans, the pillow book, described the beauty of lovers asleep together. Their robes loosened, their hair mingled on shared pillows. In these writings, the moments after intimacy are portrayed as the most beautiful when the body relaxes, when lovers drift into sleep with no performance, no pretense. The nakedness of sleep is presented as a soft, almost sacred experience, more intimate than sex itself. In Native American traditions, dream sharing was sometimes part of courtship. Among certain plains tribes, a young couple might lie together, under buffalo hides, whispering dreams into each other's ears as they drifted into sleep. This wasn't necessarily about physical nakedness, but emotional nakedness, revealing hopes, fears, and visions in the liminal space between waking and dreaming. The act of falling asleep beside someone unclothed was a sign of complete trust, a willingness to let go of the waking world and enter the unknown together. In modern times, research shows that couples who sleep naked together report higher levels of relationship satisfaction. Studies conducted by universities in the UK and the US have found that skin-to-skin contact during sleep increases oxytocin, reduces cortisol, and leads to better communication during waking hours. Therapists often recommend naked sleep as a way to rebuild intimacy in relationships strained by stress, routine, or distance. For some couples, it becomes a nightly ritual, not always sexual, but always bonding. And yet, not all naked sleep between partners is about love. History also records darker moments when sleeping unclothed beside another person was a matter of power, coercion, or control. In times of slavery, colonization, or conquest, the naked sleeping body could become a symbol of ownership or vulnerability. Enslaved people were often forced to sleep without clothes, sometimes in communal quarters, stripped not just of garments, but of dignity. In brothels and concubine quarters throughout history, women and men were made to sleep unclothed, not for comfort, but to prevent escape, theft, or rebellion. These moments remind us that naked sleep carries layers of meaning, not all of them gentle or romantic. In literature, this complexity appears again and again. In Shakespeare's plays, love scenes often end with the suggestion of shared sleep, a moment when lovers lie together, no longer in performance, but in quiet trust. In Othello, the tragic image of Desdemona asleep in bed, vulnerable and unclothed, becomes a symbol of innocence destroyed by jealousy. In modern films, the post-coital scene of lovers asleep together is a cliché, but also a moment that directors use to show true intimacy. The audience sees the characters not in the heat of passion, but in the stillness of rest, their bodies relaxed, their defenses down. And then there's the solitary naked sleeper, the person who sleeps unclothed alone, not for love, but for personal comfort or healing. For many, this is a way to reconnect with the body, to reclaim a sense of self after trauma, heartbreak, or loneliness. Therapists sometimes recommend this practice as part of self-acceptance work. Lying in bed naked, feeling the weight of sheets on skin, breathing deeply, and learning to rest without shame. In the LGBTQ community, especially among people healing from rejection or stigma, naked sleep can be a private act of self-love, a way to remind the body that it belongs fully to itself. Across cultures, time, and geography, the act of sharing. Naked sleep is more than just a side effect of intimacy. It's a ritual, a symbol, a mirror of human connection. Whether it happens in a palace or a tent, between spouses or lovers, in joy or pain, it represents the most vulnerable state of being together. Tonight, as you lie in your bed, think of the millions of couples across history who have done the same, some in love, some in fear, some in hope. The shared breath, the warm skin, the quiet surrender to sleep, it's one of the oldest forms of trust we have. In the next part of this story, we'll explore the relationship between naked sleep and dreams. We'll look at how dream interpretation, prophecy, and superstition have always been tied to the unclothed body at night, and why people believed that sleeping without clothes made dreams more vivid, strange, or revealing. Stay with me. The night still holds more mysteries. If you've ever wondered why dreams often feel more vivid when you're sleeping without clothes, you're not alone throughout history. People across the world have believed that naked sleep doesn't just change the way the body rests, it changes the mind's relationship with the dream world. In this part of the story, we'll explore how dreams and nakedness have been linked in cultures, from ancient shamans to modern psychologists. We'll see how being unclothed at night was thought to open portals to other realms, reveal secret desires, or invite visions that clothed sleep could never deliver. Let's begin with the ancient Greeks, who saw sleep and dreams as divine territory. The temples of Asclepius, the healing god, practiced a ritual called incubation, where sick or troubled people would sleep inside sacred spaces, hoping for healing dreams. Part of this ritual involved cleansing the body, often sleeping naked, on the temple floors, covered only by thin blankets or animal skins. The belief was that removing clothes removed worldly distractions, allowing the soul to drift closer to the gods in the dream state. The body, in its natural state, was seen as more open to messages from beyond. Priests interpreted the dreams in the morning, believing that the unclothed sleeper received clearer, more direct communication from divine forces than someone wrapped in daily garments. Similar practices existed in ancient Mesopotamia, where dream interpretation was a serious profession. Clay tablets dating back thousands of years contain lists of dream symbols and their meanings, including not just the content of dreams, but the conditions under which they occurred. Some texts recommended sleeping naked under the moon before seeking prophetic dreams, believing that the body's exposure to night air aligned it more closely with cosmic energies. In ancient Egypt, the same themes appear. Egyptian priests recorded dreams on papyrus, advising those seeking visions to sleep unclothed in special positions. On the left side, to receive messages from the goddess Isis. On the right, to channel the god Osiris. Sleeping without clothes was considered part of the purification process, cleansing not just the body, but the spirit before entering the vulnerable world of dreams. The connection between nudity and prophecy extended to the Hebrew Bible as well. The prophet Samuel, when receiving his first visions, was described as lying unclothed in the temple, a symbol of his openness to divine instruction. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, some passages suggest members of certain sects slept without clothes during ritual fasts and dream vigils, believing this made the soul lighter, more capable of ascending into visionary states during the night. In medieval Europe, dream manuals often warned that sleeping clothed in tight or heavy fabrics could lead to nightmares or incubus, dreams experiences of suffocation or oppression during sleep. Today, we'd call this sleep paralysis, but back then, it was seen as an actual demonic visitation. Some believed that sleeping naked reduced the risk because demons were said to be attracted to the energies trapped in clothes. By exposing the skin to air and keeping the body free, people thought they could avoid spiritual attacks during dreams. In Eastern traditions, similar ideas persisted. In Taoist alchemy, practitioners sometimes slept naked during meditation retreats, especially when practicing dream yoga, a discipline designed to maintain consciousness while dreaming. The idea was to strip away not just physical garments, but mental attachments, allowing the sleeper to move freely through dream landscapes, without the baggage of ego or identity. Buddhist dream practice in Tibet followed a related path, where monks prepared for visionary sleep by removing worldly symbols clothing, included before entering dream states meant to bring wisdom or enlightenment. But dreams aren't always sacred. Sometimes they reveal the strange corners of the mind, the suppressed thoughts, the desires, and fears we hide during the day. Freud believed that dreams of being naked in public were among the most common symbols of anxiety, a fear of being exposed, judged, or seen without masks. Yet he also acknowledged that literal naked sleep could affect the content of dreams, making them more sensual, vivid, or emotionally intense. His letters mentioned patients who reported richer dreams when they slept without clothes, suggesting a link between physical openness and psychological depth. Carl Jung took a different angle, viewing nakedness in dreams as a return to the primordial self, the archetypal human being beneath all cultural roles. To Jung, the unclothed sleeper symbolized a reunion with the collective unconscious, the shared memory pool of humanity. In his private journals, he described dreams that began with him removing clothes before entering mystical landscapes, a symbolic shedding of the ego to face the deeper layers of the psyche. In Native American cultures, dream catchers and other, sleep rituals often involved preparing the body carefully before sleep. Some tribes believed that sleeping without clothes allowed the spirit to leave the body more easily during dreams, traveling to other realms for guidance or healing. Shamans practiced vision sleep, lying naked on the ground under animal hides or in sweat lodges, seeking dreams that revealed hunting grounds, weather patterns, or messages from ancestors. In Australian Aboriginal Dreamtime stories, sleep is the gateway to ancestral knowledge. The dreaming is both a spiritual world and a parallel reality where time folds in on itself. Some elders teach that sleeping close to the earth, skin to soil, enhances dream clarity because the body absorbs the vibrations of the land. The stories passed down through generations describe ancestors sleeping naked in the open, dreaming the world into being, shaping rivers, mountains, and stars through their night visions. In parts of Africa, traditional healers known as sangomas use dreams to diagnose illness or predict community events. Some rituals involve sleeping naked in caves, on animal skins, or near sacred rivers, believing that the body's openness allows spirits to communicate more clearly. In these contexts, dreams are not random, they're messages, and the way you prepare for sleep determines how clear those messages will be. In modern times, dream research continues to explore the connection between the body and the mind during sleep. Studies in sleep labs have found that people who sleep in cooler conditions, often without clothes, experience more REM sleep, the phase of sleep where vivid dreams occur. Temperature regulation plays a role in brain function during the young night, and when the body can cool naturally, the brain transitions into dream cycles more smoothly. Some researchers believe that tactile sensations like sheets on bare skin stimulate parts of the brain associated with emotional processing, potentially influencing the content of dreams. This may explain why people report more sensual or emotionally intense dreams when sleeping unclothed. There's also the phenomenon of lucid dreaming, becoming aware that you're dreaming while still asleep. Some lucid dreamers report that sleeping naked helps trigger these experiences, possibly because the heightened body awareness carries over into the dream state. Without the physical boundaries of clothing, the mind may become more attuned to bodily sensations, creating a feedback loop that alerts the sleeper to the dream environment. But naked sleep and dreams aren't always peaceful. Nightmares often involve themes of exposure being seen, caught, or revealed. For some, sleeping without clothes can intensify these feelings, especially if they carry cultural or personal anxieties about vulnerability. Sleep psychologists note that people with anxiety disorders sometimes avoid naked sleep because it makes them feel too exposed, and this can affect dream content. Conversely, others use naked sleep as a therapeutic tool, confronting fears of exposure in a safe, private environment, gradually reshaping the mind's associations with the body and vulnerability. And then there's the role of sexuality. Dreams about desire, longing, or forbidden encounters often occur during naked sleep, not just because of physical sensation, but because of the mental state unclothed sleep creates. Without clothes, the boundaries between self and world feel thinner. The subconscious mind taps into deeper layers of feeling, weaving dreams that might not surface during the day. This has been noted in erotic literature, from ancient poetry to modern romance novels, where the imagery of sleeping naked often precedes or parallels descriptions of dreams and desires. In contemporary spiritual movements, some people practice intentional dreaming, where they set goals or questions before sleep. Part of the ritual involves sleeping without clothes, to symbolize honesty and openness to whatever the dream world offers. Workshops on dream work sometimes include group meditations done unclothed, in safe, consensual spaces, to enhance trust and connection before entering the dream state. Whether these practices produce more meaningful dreams is debated, but participants often report feeling more connected to their inner lives. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, think about the layers you remove, not just the physical ones, but the mental ones. When you close your eyes, you enter a world where logic fades and symbols take over, where the boundaries between you and the universe blur. Whether you sleep in silk, cotton, or with nothing at all, you're stepping into a tradition as old as humanity. The journey into dreams, the nightly return to the unknown. In the next part of this story, we'll explore the role of naked sleep in healing, how people have used sleep without clothes as part of recovery from illness, emotional trauma, and life's many wounds. We'll uncover medical treatments, spa traditions, and modern wellness trends that encourage letting the body breathe freely at night. Stay with me. The night still has more secrets to share. If you've ever wondered whether sleep itself could be a form of healing, you're not alone. And when you add nakedness to the equation, the idea becomes even more intriguing. For thousands of years, people have believed that sleeping without clothes is more than just a way to rest. It's a tool for recovery, a way to heal both body and mind. In this part of the story, we'll explore how different cultures, medical traditions, and modern wellness movements have used naked sleep to treat illness, soothe emotional pain, and restore health after trauma. We'll begin in the ancient world, where sleep and healing were inseparable. In Greece, the temples of Asclepius weren't just places for dream incubation. They were hospitals, where patients came to recover from injuries, fevers, or emotional distress. Priests prescribed sleep as medicine, and part of the ritual often involved removing clothes before lying down on sacred beds called clini. The belief was that the body healed faster when freed from the constriction of garments, allowing the skin to breathe and the soul to drift closer to divine assistance. Hippocrates himself recommended naked sleep for fevers and joint pain, arguing that overheating the body with clothes during sleep could trap disease inside. He also taught that the skin expelled impurities during the night, and blocking this process with layers of fabric could delay recovery. Similar ideas appeared in Roman bathhouses, where, after sweating in hot rooms and plunging into cold pools, people often lay down naked on stone benches to nap, believing this helped the body regulate temperature and flush out toxins. The connection between skin exposure and health continued into medieval times, though it was sometimes distorted by superstition. In Europe, sweat cures involved wrapping patients in hot blankets until they perspired, then stripping them naked and allowing them to cool slowly while sleeping. The idea was to drive out illness through sweat, then let the body reset. These treatments were risky. Some people caught chills or pneumonia, but they persisted for centuries because they seemed to work in certain cases, especially for fevers or skin conditions. In traditional Chinese medicine, sleeping without clothes was sometimes recommended as part of balancing yin and yang. Heat illnesses, stress, and certain excess fire conditions were believed to benefit from sleeping bare under light covers, allowing the body to release excess energy. Physicians advised patients to sleep in well-ventilated spaces, naked or nearly naked, particularly during recovery from fevers or after childbirth. The logic was simple: balance the internal temperature, calm the spirit, and let nature restore the body. In Ayurvedic medicine, similar practices existed. After applying healing oils during massages, Patients were told to rest naked or in minimal clothing to allow the herbs to penetrate the skin and the body to relax fully. This practice was not just about treating illness, it was about preventing future disease by keeping the body in harmony with the environment. Naked sleep was part of a broader wellness ritual, a nightly cleansing of both body and mind. But healing isn't just physical. Emotional wounds often require rest, and history is filled with examples of people using naked sleep to recover from grief, trauma, or heartbreak. In the Stoic philosophy of ancient Rome, writers like Seneca advised chipping away material concerns at bedtime, including clothing, as a way to reconnect with the self after a hard day. To lie down unclothed was to face mortality, to remind oneself that beneath status and possessions, the human body is simple, fragile, and in need of care. This practice wasn't about shame. It was about humility and acceptance. In monastic traditions, naked sleep sometimes symbolized surrender to God, especially during periods of illness or spiritual crisis. Monks and nuns in certain orders would sleep on bare boards, without clothes, as a way of acknowledging human weakness and inviting divine healing. Some believed that the soul could leave the body more easily during sleep if the physical vessel was unencumbered, allowing for visions, revelations, or inner peace. In modern times, the connection between sleep, nakedness, and healing has shifted into new territories. Medical research now shows that cool sleeping environments support better immune function, lower inflammation, and improve recovery from stress. Sleeping without clothes allows the body to regulate its core temperature more efficiently, leading to deeper, more restorative sleep cycles. During these cycles, the body repairs tissue, balances hormones, and strengthens the nervous system. For people recovering from surgeries or injuries, doctors often recommend airing out wounds, letting the skin remain uncovered when possible to prevent infection and promote healing. This idea extends into sleep, where the absence of tight fabrics reduces friction on scars, bruises, or sensitive skin. Dermatologists suggest that sleeping naked can help prevent certain skin conditions, like fungal infections or rashes, especially in areas prone to moisture. It also allows for better circulation, which speeds up the healing process overall. In the mental health world, therapists sometimes recommend naked sleep as part of trauma recovery. For people who have experienced body shame, assault, or medical trauma, sleeping unclothed in a safe environment can become a way to rebuild trusting oneself. This isn't about exposure, it's about acceptance. Feeling sheets on bare skin, breathing deeply, and realizing that the body is safe and cared for during sleep can rewire the brain's stress responses, helping survivors reclaim comfort with their physical form. Some therapeutic retreats offer naked rest as part of healing programs, allowing participants to nap in private, skin to air, after intense emotional work. The act of lying down without clothes, especially in a mindful setting, can symbolize a return to innocence, a shedding of trauma, or a new chapter of self-compassion. Spa cultures around the world incorporate similar ideas. In Scandinavian saunas, after sweating out toxins, people often lie down naked on cool wooden benches or in relaxation rooms, drifting into light sleep to complete the healing process. In Japan, onsen baths are followed by quiet rest in an unclothed state, wrapped only in towels or robes, allowing the body to recalibrate after immersion in mineral waters. These traditions are not just about luxury, they're about restoring equilibrium, letting the body breathe, and resetting the nervous system. In holistic wellness movements, sleep coaches often recommend minimalist sleepwear, or no sleepwear at all, as part of sleep hygiene. The idea is to reduce barriers between the body and the sleep environment, minimizing sensory distractions and allowing for a fuller relaxation response. Some programs include breathwork, meditation, and gratitude practices done while lying naked. In bed, turning the act of sleep into a nightly ritual of healing, not just a passive rest. In the world of childbirth and postpartum recovery, skin-to-skin contact is now standard practice in hospitals. Newborns are placed directly on the mothers. Bare chest after birth, regulating heart rate, temperature, and stress hormones. Some postpartum care experts extend this practice into sleep, recommending that parents sleep skin-to-skin with infants when safe to do so. This practice strengthens bonds, stabilizes breathing patterns, and promotes faster recovery for both mother and child. In couples therapy, sleeping naked together is sometimes used to rebuild intimacy after relationship trauma. It's not about sex, it's about sharing a vulnerable, quiet space where healing touch and warmth replace words. Therapists note that couples who sleep unclothed report lower cortisol levels, better communication, and fewer arguments during the day. In the biohacking community, tech-savvy wellness enthusiasts experiment with sleeping naked to improve recovery from workouts, optimize hormone production, and reduce nighttime cortisol. Some use infrared blankets, grounding sheets, or cooling pads in combination with naked sleep to enhance healing during the night. They monitor biomarkers, sleep cycles, and heart rate variability, treating the body like a laboratory while honoring ancient practices of skin-to-skin rest. But healing through naked sleep isn't always about physical recovery. It can also mean healing the relationship between body and self. In a world where many people struggle with body image, sleeping unclothed can be an act of defiance against shame. It's a way to tell the brain, this body, exactly as it is, deserves rest, comfort, and kindness. For people recovering from eating disorders, body dysmorphia, or years of negative self-talk, naked sleep becomes a nightly affirmation of worthiness. No performance, no hiding, just rest. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, consider what healing means for you. Maybe it's physical, letting your muscles repair, your skin breathe, your heart slow down. Maybe it's emotional, releasing the day's stress, forgiving yourself for mistakes, allowing your mind to soften into dreams. Whether you sleep clothed or naked, you're participating in a human ritual as old as time, the nightly renewal of body and spirit. In the next part of this story, we'll look at the taboos and controversies around naked sleep, how different societies have tried to regulate, forbid, or moralize about what people do in bed after the lights go out. We'll explore the cultural tensions between privacy, shame, modesty, and freedom, and why something as simple as sleeping without clothes can still spark debate today. Stay with me. The night isn't finished yet. If you've ever wondered why something as natural as sleeping naked can spark discomfort, debate, or even scandal, you're not alone. Across history, societies have tried to control how people sleep, not just where and when, but what they wear or don't wear while doing it. In this part of the story, we'll explore the taboos, moral panics, and cultural controversies surrounding naked sleep. We'll uncover why different civilizations have policed the private act of bedtime undress, and how these tensions reveal deeper anxieties about the body, control, and social order. Let's begin in Puritan New England, where the body was treated with suspicion. For early American settlers, modesty was not just a virtue, it was a law. Colonial records include cases where people were punished for sleeping naked, even alone. The fear wasn't about health, it was about morality. Leaders believed that Satan exploited moments of bodily vulnerability, especially during sleep. Ministers preached sermons warning that unclothed bodies attracted demonic attention, particularly in the hours between dusk and dawn. In some towns, neighbors reported each other for failing to sleep decently attired, especially if they shared beds for warmth, a common practice in early America. Laws were passed requiring people to wear at least a shift or long nightshirt. To bed, lest temptation take hold in dreams or emergencies, expose the body to public view. Fires, floods, and sudden illness could force people into the streets, and Puritan leaders feared that unseemly nakedness might be witnessed, causing social decay. In medieval Europe, similar anxieties surfaced, though for different reasons. The Church taught that nakedness was linked to the fall of Adam and Eve, a reminder of human sinfulness. Monks and nuns were forbidden to sleep unclothed, even in private cells. Sumptuary laws regulated not just what people wore during the day, but also what they wore at night. In some regions, bedclothes were taxed as luxury goods, and owning silk. Nightwear was a symbol of wealth and status. Yet naked sleep persisted behind closed doors, creating a gap between public morality and private comfort. This tension created a strange cultural double standard. While public nakedness was condemned, private nakedness in sleep was often quietly tolerated, as long as it remained unseen. But when it became visible during fires, accidents, or scandalous rumors, it sparked outrage. The fear wasn't just about bodies. It was about losing control over private spaces. In Victorian England, these anxieties reached new heights. The Victorians were obsessed with propriety, yet they also struggled with contradictions. On one hand, medical advice often recommended naked sleep for health doctors, prescribed air baths, and encouraged patients to sleep in cool rooms with minimal clothing. On the other hand, moralists warned that this practice led to impure thoughts or self-abuse, their euphemism for masturbation. Children were particularly targeted by these warnings. Advice manuals urged parents to ensure their children were fully clothed at night to prevent corruptions of the flesh. Some parents even sewed sleep garments, clothes to prevent nighttime. Exploration of the body. In adult bedrooms, couples were expected to follow strict codes of behavior. Separate beds became fashionable among the upper classes, and even when couples shared a bed, they often wore nightcaps, gowns, and layers of fabric, reinforcing distance and control. Yet behind this veneer of propriety, private diaries and letters reveal that many Victorians ignored these rules, sleeping naked for comfort or intimacy while pretending otherwise in public. The tension between public virtue and private reality became a cultural undercurrent, one that persists today. In Islamic cultures, modesty norms also influence sleep habits, but interpretations vary. Traditional Islamic teachings encourage covering the body during sleep, especially if sleeping in shared spaces. Hadith sayings of the Prophet Muhammad mention the importance of guarding one's privacy, even at night. However, scholars differ on what this means in practice. Some interpret it as requiring minimal coverings, while others focus on the context. If someone sleeps alone, nakedness is less concerning. In many Muslim households, cultural customs emphasize modest sleepwear, especially in multi-generational homes where family members share rooms. Yet in private marital settings, sleeping naked is often encouraged within the bounds of halal intimacy. The key distinction is between public and private space, between exposure to strangers and trust, between partners. Similar patterns appear in Orthodox Jewish communities, where modesty laws seem to extend to sleep. Rabbinical texts discuss appropriate sleep attire, often recommending loose-fitting garments that cover the body even during rest. Yet within marriage, these rules relax, allowing for nudity in private moments. The balance between modesty and intimacy is negotiated differently in each household, reflecting cultural nuances and personal interpretations of religious law. In other cultures, naked sleep carries different meanings. In parts of Africa, South America, and the Pacific Islands, sleeping unclothed is normal due to climate and tradition, and carries no moral stigma. But when these cultures encountered colonial powers, their practices were often judged as uncivilized. Missionaries in the 19th and 20th centuries imposed Western sleep customs, introducing pajamas, nightgowns, and blankets even in hot climates where such clothing was impractical. This wasn't just about comfort, it was about control, an attempt to reshape cultural identities through the regulation of the body at rest. Colonial officials believed that imposing clothing on colonized peoples would instill discipline, modesty, and social order. Yet for many communities, this led to cultural erasure and health problems, like overheating and skin conditions, caused by unfamiliar materials. In modern times, debates about naked sleep continue, often in unexpected places. In shared dormitories, military barracks, prisons, and boarding schools, rules about sleepwear often reflect underlying power structures. Institutions regulate nighttime, behavior to enforce discipline, reduce sexual tension, or maintain uniformity. In the military, soldiers are often required to sleep partially clothed, ready for sudden mobilization. In prisons, inmates may be forced to wear specific garments at night for safety, surveillance, or modesty, even in hot conditions. These rules aren't just about practicality, they're about control over the most private moments of life. In contemporary parenting, naked sleep sometimes triggers concern. Parents worry about children sleeping unclothed for fear of safety, abuse, or social judgment. Online forums brim with questions. Is it okay for my child to sleep naked? What if there's a fire? What if guests see? These anxieties reveal cultural fears about the exposed body, privacy, and the unpredictability of the world outside the bedroom. Even in adult relationships, disagreements arise. Some couples argue over sleepwear, with one partner preferring nakedness for comfort while the other feels uncomfortable or exposed. These tensions often stem from personal history, body image issues, trauma, cultural upbringing, all of which shape our relationship to the naked body at rest. Popular media reflects these contradictions. Films, advertisements, and magazines show glamorous images of couples sleeping naked under crisp white sheets, suggesting freedom, intimacy, and luxury. Yet in real life, many people still hesitate to adopt the practice, worried about modesty, emergencies, or social norms. Studies show that while a third of adults in Western countries sleep naked regularly, many feel conflicted about it, caught between comfort and cultural expectations. In some places like Germany and Scandinavia, social nudity is more accepted, and sleeping naked is common. In others, like the United States or the UK, attitudes are more divided, reflecting the lingering influence of Puritanism and Victorian morality. And then there's the legal question. What happens if you're caught in an emergency while sleeping naked? Firefighters and paramedics often encounter people who flee burning buildings or medical crisis without time to dress. While most responders prioritize safety over modesty, some survivors report feeling humiliated by the exposure. This fear leads people to sleep in clothes, just in case, reinforcing the cultural message that the body must always be prepared for public view, even in private spaces. But perhaps the deepest taboo is not about the body itself, it's about vulnerability. Naked sleep represents total trust in the environment, a belief that you are safe enough to let down all guards. In societies obsessed with control, surveillance, and performance, this kind of surrender is unsettling. It challenges the idea that every moment must be managed, curated, and protected. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, think about the invisible rules that shape your choices. Are you following habit, comfort, or fear? Do you choose pajamas because of warmth, modesty, or because that's what you are taught? Do you sleep naked for health, intimacy, rebellion, or freedom? The body at rest tells a story, not just about biology, but about culture, history, and who we believe ourselves to be. In the next and final part of this story, we'll bring everything together. We'll reflect on why the simple act of sleeping without clothes continues to fascinate, divide, and unite us. We'll explore how this one nightly ritual connects the past to the present, weaving a shared human experience that stretches across centuries and civilizations. Stay with me, our journey is almost complete. So here we are, at the end of this long and curious journey through the history of naked sleep. Journey that's taken us from ancient temples to royal courts, from battlefield tents to monastic cells, from space stations to modern bedrooms. And what have we learned? That something as simple as removing clothes before sleep is not simple at all. It's layered with meaning, charged with history, and loaded with the quiet weight of human vulnerability. Tonight, as you lie listening to this, whether you're clothed or not, whether you're alone or with someone you love, you're participating in a ritual older than language itself, the nightly surrender of consciousness, the letting go of control, the hope that your body will heal and your mind will drift into dreams. And for millions of people, that ritual has always included nakedness. But why? Why has sleeping without clothes persisted across cultures, despite social pressures, religious rules, and changing technologies? The answer is both simple and profound. Because when the world quiets, when the lights go out, when the masks of daily life fall away, the body remembers what it is. Not a symbol, not a status object, not a tool for labor or display, but a living, breathing organism that longs for softness, warmth, and rest. The naked body in sleep is the great equalizer. Kings and peasants, soldiers and lovers, monks and merchants, they've all closed their eyes in the dark, skin against linen, fur, or earth, listening to the sound of their breath, knowing that for a few hours they are just bodies again, nothing more. And in that moment, whether they called it health, healing, love, or simple comfort, they chose to let the body be what it is, natural, unfinished, vulnerable. Across history, the reasons for naked sleep have shifted, but the core impulse has stayed the same. Some did it for health, believing that cool skin led to longer life or clearer dreams. Some did it for intimacy, to feel the warmth of another body, to share breath in the quiet hours when no one else watched. Some did it for survival, removing wet clothes after storms or wars, pressing skin to skin for warmth in lifeboats, trenches, or snow-covered huts. Some did it for rebellion, breaking rules about modesty, rejecting social constraints, claiming back their flesh from the gaze of the outside world. And some did it because it simply felt better, the skin breathing, the sheets soft, the night air brushing against the edges of the self. But alongside these choices came the fears, the taboos, the shame. Societies have tried to control sleep, to regulate not just where people lie down, but how they do it, what they wear, who they share a bed with, and what happens after the lights go out. From Puritan sermons to Victorian manuals, from colonial laws to modern cultural anxieties, people have been told what their bodies should do in private. And yet, behind closed doors, the oldest habit continues. Naked sleep persists quietly in bedrooms around the world. It persists in city apartments, in desert tents, in forest cabins, on ships rocking in the night sea, and in futuristic sleep pods orbiting the Earth. It persists not because it's fashionable, but because it feels like returning home to the body's original state. Think of all the people throughout all of history who have shared this experience. The Roman soldier is removing his armor and lying naked on cool marble after a brutal march. The medieval midwife told a mother to sleep, bare to heal faster after birth. The samurai meditated unclothed before drifting into lucid dreams. The sailor stripped by salt and wind, falling asleep under the open sky. Nothing between his skin and the universe but air. The modern couple tangled in blankets, skin to skin, the quiet rhythm of breath binding them together without words. The survivor of trauma, learning to trust their body again, lying naked under clean sheets, letting sleep become a kind of therapy. The astronaut in space, adjusting the temperature of the sleep pod, drifting weightless, bare, with the curve of the Earth beneath their floating body. These moments are not isolated. They are connected by an invisible thread, a shared human ritual that defies time and culture. To sleep naked is to admit that beneath the armor of life, beneath uniforms, social roles, and digital avatars, we are still flesh and breath, soft and temporary, part of nature, part of history. It's a reminder that the body is not the enemy, nor the object of shame, but the vessel that carries us through waking and dreaming alike. And perhaps that's why, even with all our technology, with all our laws, fashions, and fears, the practice continues. We are drawn back to it night after night, when the day is done and the world fades away. In those moments, naked sleep is not about sex, scandal, or rebellion. It's about honesty, about letting the body be what it is, without layers, without disguise, just skin, just warmth, just rest. Tonight, wherever you are, in a crowded city or a quiet village, in summer heat or winter cold, you're part of this ancient story. You're one more sleeper in the long chain of humanity, closing your eyes, trusting the night to hold you. Whether you sleep naked or not, you've now seen the hidden history beneath the blankets, the secret life of sleep that most people never think about. And as you drift into your dreams, remember, the body knows how to rest. It has done so for millennia. It will do so again tonight, breathing softly, healing quietly, carrying you through the darkness until morning comes. Thank you for listening to this story. May your sleep tonight be deep, safe, and free.